Chapter 26:47. Following the scent of saliva, the little white squirrel immediately bristled and assumed a battle stance. "Master, be careful." "Awoo." From behind the small building, a tiger with fiery red fur and a ring of white fur around its neck suddenly scuttled out. Chocho also let out an awoo, causing Sir Jojo's head to be filled with black lines. When a fierce tiger roars, a squirrel like you also howls like a wolf. Where did you learn this weird habit? It's all weak chicken's bad influence. The air here slightly stagnated. At the same time, in Gilded Garden, Mu Qingya and Mu Rochuan, who were currently eating with Mu Jingfeng, were happily chatting with a family of three. At this moment, a page boy suddenly came in to report that the crown princess had barged into chasing Wind Garden. Mu Jingfeng's eyes were filled with anger as he slammed his chopsticks on the table, unable to suppress his anger. Didn't I already say that no one is allowed to go to that place? She's causing trouble the moment she comes back. Don't bother with her. Mu Qingya's heart skipped a beat, and she hurriedly pulled Mu Jingfeng's hand, gently advising, "Husband, aren't you going overboard by saying that to the child? That child has only returned for 2 days, so how does she know? Didn't you say that we can't go to that place? That place is abnormally dangerous, so husband should quickly send someone over to take a look." Mu Jingfeng suppressed his anger as he coldly said with pursed lips, "Isn't she very capable? Just let her be." Mu Qingya couldn't help but panic when she heard this. "Father told us to take good care of her. If she gets injured on the second day of her return, Father won't be the only one who can't accept it. If this matter spreads to the palace and the emperor finds out, he might even accuse us of failing to protect the crown princess. Simply troublesome." Mu Jingfeng was furious as he slammed the table. Ziwei, in the Mu family's eldest branch, the elite eldest disciple, Mu Ziwei, walked in and respectfully bowed to Mu Jingfeng. "Master, go, bring some people to Chasing Wind Garden to take a look. It's fine as long as she's still breathing. It's good to let her suffer a little." "Husband." Mu Qingya had a disapproving look on her face as she stared at Mu Jingfeng and said, "Aren't you just making Xingchen feel bad?" Mu Jingfeng's handsome face darkened as he coldly said, "Let's go in and take a look. We'll help if we can." Mu Rochuan also stood up. "I'll go take a look too, Father. Stay for dinner. You don't have to worry about this." "Father, she's also my little sister." Mu Rochuan hurriedly said, "I'll be back soon." Mu Jingfeng watched as his eldest daughter left. He harumphed and turned to Mu Qingya to say, "It's hard on you to be so devoted to her, but she doesn't appreciate it at all and keeps thinking about getting the memorial tablet back. She's making you look bad. And yesterday, she had to kneel 3 times and cow down 9 times along the way. She must have suffered so much." Mu Qingya smiled gently and reached out to hold Mu Jingfeng's hand. "Don't feel wronged. As long as the two of you can put aside your differences and coexist peacefully, Xian Er's suffering is nothing." My face was even less of a concern. Stardust had not been feeling well these past few days. "Husband, if you treat Jojo better, Stardust will also feel better." Mu Jingfeng's face was taut, and his heart was burning with anger. Was it because he did not want to treat his daughter well? Was it because he did not want to be close to his daughter? However, that stoic face of hers was expressionless the entire day when she saw him and even scolded him from time to time. Chapter 26:48. No matter how much he wanted to get close to his daughter, he still couldn't stand that cold face. Mu Jingfeng's face darkened. His heart sank when he thought of that cold face that resembled his ex-wife's. Both mother and daughter were the same. Neither of them were likable. After this incident, Mu Jingfeng couldn't eat anymore. He left after comforting Mu Qingya a little more. Servant girl Tsong Lu stood to the side and couldn't help wringing her fingers, not daring to speak. Mu Qingya picked up her teacup and looked back at her with a spurious smile. "If you have something to say, say it. Don't you feel uncomfortable holding it in?" "Madam, this servant doesn't understand." "What's there to not understand? That crown princess treated you, an eldest miss, so badly. So why are you still so protective of her and treat her so well?" Mu Qingya sighed. "Put yourself in her shoes. That child lost her mother at a young age and only recently found out about her background and found her father after so many years on Seacombe Planet. But family head sigh. Older sister Chu Yun is such a proud person, so her child's character and talent won't be bad. I sincerely hope that father and daughter can bury the hatchet and resolve all misunderstandings. But how could she ever care about you, madam? Look at her. She brought the memorial tablet to slap madam's face. Right now, all the major patrician families and sects in the entire imperial capital are laughing at you. You've been a mistress of the household for so many years, but you're still firmly suppressed by the former official wife. No matter how capable she is, she's still only the Mu family's second wife. Shut up, a nanny shouted angrily. Song Lu, I see that you're becoming more and more impudent and rude. Song Lu also feels sorry for madam. The servant girl stomped her feet and sobbed. All right. Mu Qingya helplessly took Song Lu's hand and patted it. She glanced at the nanny next to her. Nanny, don't blame this servant girl. She's also wholeheartedly concerned about me and feels sorry for me. But I really don't feel wronged at all. Don't worry. From what I see, although the crown princess's face is cold, she's also someone who understands the big picture and etiquette. Everything can't be rushed. Take it slow. One day, she'll know that we sincerely treat her well. I don't dare to get too close to her. I'm afraid she'll misunderstand that I'm up to no good. Mu Qingya sighed and said, but I can tell that the child is just a little cautious. She's really a good child. She'll be fine as long as you don't provoke her. After we spend more time together in the future, she will definitely understand the good of the family. Song Lu shut her mouth, and the wet nurse Nanny Chiu also nodded and said with a smile, no matter what others say, as long as the old patriarch and the patriarch support you, madam will always be the mistress of the Mu family. Why bother with those who have been afflicted by the plague and whose mouths are cheap? Mu Qingya shook her head with a smile. A person who looked like a manservant rushed in and said, Madam, all the disciples in the house have heard about the crown princess barging in a chasing wind garden, and all of them have rushed over to watch the show. Mu Qingya's face darkened. Nonsense. At that time, Arbor did not know that his intrusion in a chasing wind garden had alarmed the entire Mu clan. At this moment, she was staring at the red-haired tiger. Awoo, awoo. The little white squirrel bared its teeth and stood in front of Arbor. Its beady eyes stared warily at the huge tiger. Chapter 26:49. You're courting death. How dare you yell at my master? I'll kill you right away. Using its tiny claws to dig at the vegetation on the ground, the little white squirrel wagged its four little tails, revealing a fierce furry face as it glared at the other party like a tiger eyeing its prey. The grass on the side trembled slightly. Suddenly, a gloomy, scary, wrinkled old face suddenly appeared in front of Arbor without any warning. The old woman's movements were very fast, almost without any pause. Like a wisp of smoke, she appeared in front of Arbor in an instant. Arbor was startled and subconsciously took a step back, facing an old face that was half burned black, missing an eye, and wrinkled old skin. Hello! The fierce tiger angrily roared. The old woman suddenly reached out a hand to stop it, and a hoarse voice came out of her mouth. Red hair, stop. Her one eye faintly stared at Arbor, staring at Arbor to the point that he felt a little scared, and his whole body felt uncomfortable. A string of old tears suddenly flowed down from his one eye. The old woman suddenly knelt down without any warning and cried out with tears flowing down her face, Miss, you're back. Arbor's heart slightly jumped, but he still couldn't help but take 2 steps back, staring at the old woman's eyes, suddenly flashing. Miss, Chen Kuei has been waiting for you here for a long time, and finally you're back. Arbor expressionlessly looked at the old woman, and after a long while, he said in a deep voice, You've got the wrong person. The one-eyed old woman called Chen Kuei was slightly startled. Her one eye full of hope looked at Arbor for a long time, and suddenly said, You are my family's Miss Daughter? At this time, a small noise suddenly came from outside the wall of Chasing Wind Garden. The red-furred tiger's face was full of annoyance, and he angrily roared, wagging his tail, and signaled to the old woman with a glance. The old woman nodded and said with a sullen face, "Chase away all those people." "Illo!" The tiger roared angrily. Its four paws stomped on the ground, and the tiger's body shot out like an arrow. With a whoosh, it shot out of the courtyard wall. The disciples of the Moo clan were all gathered at the entrance of Chasing Wind Garden, trying to get a glimpse of what was going on. Everyone had a curious look on their faces. "I heard that he went in for a long time. Why hasn't he come out yet? Don't tell me he tried to show off and died in there. It won't implicate our Moo family, right?" Roar! Just as everyone was talking maliciously, they suddenly saw a ferocious beast with red fur and a tiger's head jump out from the courtyard wall, glaring at them like a tiger eyeing its prey. "Wow, what is this? It's a crimson flame spitting tiger. Fuck, I forgot that this place is guarded by the crimson flame spitting tiger. Quick, let's go. Everyone was in a mess, pushing and shoving each other as they turned around and ran. How could the crimson flame spitting tiger be courteous? It opened its mouth and spat out several fist-sized fireballs. The fireballs landed in the middle of the crowd, and a few of them screamed in pain. Arbor opened the door of Chasing Wind Garden and stood at the entrance, looking coldly at those people who were burned by the flames and running away like stray dogs. A bunch of idiots. Xiao Mu gazed at them coldly before quietly standing in front of Chasing Wind Garden's entrance like this, watching them flee in all directions in a sorry state. A male disciple was caught in the tiger's claws, and he immediately knelt down and begged for mercy. Chapter 2650. When a Mu family's eldest miss, Mu Rochuan, and elite disciple Mu Zue arrived with a group of elite disciples, the commotion at Chasing Wind Garden's entrance was already beyond recognition. Meanwhile, the little stoic just coldly stood at the entrance and watched this farce. She didn't interfere or help, and her eyes were as cold as an outsider watching the show. The one-eyed old woman hunched her back and walked to Arbor's side while leaning on a reddish-gold cane. She also coldly observed the chaotic crowd at the entrance. "Quickly stop." Mu Rochuan hastily landed in front of the fire-breathing crimson tiger and released a defensive talisman, saving a disciple who was caught under the tiger's claws. That disciple was so frightened that he couldn't stop trembling, and he called out incoherently, Eldest Miss, save me." The old woman sneered. "Who allowed you to come to Chasing Wind Garden to cause trouble? Redhead, you can eat as much as you want today. Swallow all these people who dared to trespass in a Chasing Wind Garden." Roar! The fire-breathing crimson tiger promptly tore open a disciple's back with its claws and bit the arm of a female disciple beside him, tearing at her with all its might. "Ah!" That female disciple trembled all over as she cried out in alarm. Eldest Miss, save me." Eldest Mississippi Mu Rochuan's complexion was extremely terrible. She turned to look at the silent Arbor, standing by the entrance, and couldn't resist shouting harshly. "Aren't you going to tell them to stop? Do you really want to kill people?" Arbor coldly swept her a glance before turning to walk inside, Chasing Wind Garden. Upon seeing this, the old woman also followed in and left behind a sentence, "Don't let them off." Leaving behind that roaring, ferocious beast, she swaggered off. Mu Rochuan was so angry that her heart and lungs were about to explode. She could only attack the tiger with Mu Ziwei and the other elite disciples to save the Mu family disciples. Little Mississippi, the one-eyed old woman, was silent as she tottered after Arbor's footsteps. She still couldn't suppress her agitation. "Little Miss, you must be Little Miss, right? Someone who had such a similar temperament and appearance to her Miss must be Miss's biological daughter." At this moment, Arbor felt a little emotional. So the place she accidentally came to was the courtyard where her mother, Long Chuyun, used to live. More than 10 years had passed, but the scenery remained the same. The entire house was shrouded in dense inchi. From the outside, it looked like a haunted house. If she did not mention it, no one in the Mu family would remember that Long Chuyun was once the mistress of the Mu family. Chirp, chirp, chirp. The little white squirrel tugged at Arbor's belt and crawled into her arms. The old woman's eyes suddenly stared blankly as she pointed at the little white squirrel in Arbor's arms. She could not help but exclaim in surprise and joy, "Bye-bye, White Emperor." "But you? White Emperor? White Emperor?" Arbor was slightly taken aback. Judging from the woman's expression, she clearly recognized the little white squirrel in her arms. Arbor's mind turned, and a trace of doubt flashed across his brows. Could it be that this little white squirrel was related to his mother? She seemed to have grasped something in her heart, and a lightning-like inspiration flashed through her mind. Her entire person was completely stunned. "White Emperor." The old woman revealed a pleasantly surprised and sad expression. "I never thought that I would be able to see you again in my lifetime, White Emperor. You said you were called Chun Kwong." "Ah, yes, little Mississippi. This old servant is called Chun Kwong, your mother's personal wet nurse. See you tomorrow." Chapter 26:51. Arbor pursed his lips slightly and looked at the old mama in front of him with a heavy gaze. "Chun Kue. Yes, this old servant is here. Ever since mother left, have you been guarding here?" Yes. Chun Kue nodded his head excitedly and couldn't help but tear up. This old servant knew that Miss would definitely come back. "Little Miss, where is Miss?" Arbor's heart was slightly sour. His eyes focused on the old woman in front of him who had a hunched back, one of her eyes revealing a strong sense of expectation. His heart was suddenly touched. Arbor suppressed the bitter feeling in his heart and slightly clenched his fists. "All these years you've never gone out? You've always been in this house?" Yes. Therefore, if she wasn't moved by the little white squirrel today, she would have walked to this house by herself. Chun Kei, who was isolated from the world, would not know that she had returned to the Mu family. Little Miss, this old servant was isolated from the world in this wind-chasing garden, and actually did not know that Little Miss and Miss had returned. Chun Kei said with red eyes, "It was this old servant's negligence. It was this old servant." Chun Kei suddenly wanted to kneel down. Arbor hurriedly took a step forward, held her arms, and tightly held her hands. "Chun Kei, you won't be able to wait for mother anymore." The little girl's voice was slightly cold and very low. However, Chun Kei felt as if a heavy hammer had ruthlessly smashed her head. She was completely stunned all of a sudden. She stiffly stood there, staring at Arbor with red eyes, and her body could not help but slightly tremble. Is it what this old servant means? Chun Kuei's eyes were quickly filled with tears as he asked with a trembling voice. Under the little girl's expressionless face, there was a turbulent heart. "Yes," she coldly and firmly replied with a single word. Chun Kei staggered, as if all of his aura had been sucked out of his body, and he suddenly wanted to fall backwards. Arbor grabbed her arm and helped her sit down on a stone stool at the side. Her eyes were red, and she suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Silence. Arbor squatted in front of the old woman. Looking at her white hair and wrinkled face, his heart ached. Such an old woman had been guarding this haunted house all this time, waiting for her mother to return. She didn't know what kind of emotion this was. "Miss is dead." Chun, he was still not sure as he asked with a trembling voice. Arbor's eyes were red as he nodded expressionlessly. "Why?" Chun murmured. "How did such a powerful person like Miss die?" She suddenly thought of something and stared at the little white squirrel in Arbor's arms. "Ask White Emperor. White Emperor will definitely know." However, the little white squirrel's furry face was filled with confusion. Xiao Mu hugged the little squirrel's plump body tightly, so much so that the little white squirrel could feel it, squeezing it so tightly that it almost couldn't breathe. Startled Swan Dagger. 3,000 kills. Super strong beast. His body is sturdy, and his strength can move mountains and rivers. It's shaped like a large rat and has 13 huge tails. Each of them has the ability to split a mountain. One man and one beast, fighting alone, annihilated more than 9,000 people from Shantian Hall. In the Battle of the Western Wilderness, Senior's name has spread throughout the world. As Xiao Mu slowly recited, tears finally streamed down her face. It turned out that her mother had already sent her super strong war beast to her side. Chapter 2652. It turned out that the little white squirrel beside her was the battle beast that accompanied her mother to fight against the Enchanting prefecture's bandits in the western wilderness. The mother and daughter had an inexplicable fate, but she was completely unaware. Chun looked at her with red eyes. She didn't understand what Little Miss was mumbling about, but she felt uncomfortable with her heart being grabbed. It was as if an invisible giant palm was tightly gripping her heart. Just listening to it made her feel very painful. Very painful. Very painful, Little Miss. Can you tell me what's going on? Although Long Chuyun is dead, her legend has been circulating on Seacone Planet for more than 10 years, Arbor said faintly. Seacone Planet? Miss went to the lower star field? Chun-chung, do you know why she left the Mu family back then? Of course I know. Chun-chung gnashed her teeth and said hatefully, it was those ungrateful bastards who were worse than pigs and dogs that forced her to leave. Tell me, Chun-chung. I will definitely seek justice for Mother, Arbor said coldly. Chun-chung turned to look at her and reached out to grab her little hand. Little Miss, you must not try to strike a stone with an egg by yourself. I'm not alone. When Arbor said this, a faint gentleness flitted across her face. I'm not alone anymore. Chun-chung, don't worry. I won't take risks if I'm not sure. Good. Seeing her so confident, the old woman's expression couldn't help but ease a little. She quickly nodded and said, what does Little Miss want to know? This old servant will definitely tell you everything. Mama, back then, after my mother left the Divine Continent alone, she went to the lower star field. He went to the lower star field, but he was hunted down all the way. Enchanting Prefecture once sent 10,000 people to kill her in the western wilderness of the lower star field. At that time, she relied on the startling swan dagger to fight alone. She killed 9,000 people from Enchanting Prefecture before finally escaping. Now that he thought about it, the place she escaped to was Kwoto Village near Hulla Mountain. Although she won this battle, her vitality was greatly damaged after all. Therefore, not long after giving birth to her, Long Chuyun divined that she would not live for long entrusting the orphan, building the land of inheritance, and silently dying in that place alone. Everything became logical and traceable. As for the little white squirrel, it was indeed unknown why it had run from Long Chuyun's land of inheritance to the Peach Garden Mystic Realm. The Peach Garden Mystic Realm was naturally formed. It was unknown how the white squirrel had managed to enter it. The white squirrel had been severely injured in that battle. Now, it only had 4 of its 13 tails. Clearly, it had been on the brink of death in that battle. From the very first glance, it had already latched onto him. It was definitely following the aura of his bloodline. Arbor's little hand unconsciously grabbed the furry little squirrel that was obediently nestled in his arms, not moving at all. Chun-Yi's eyes were about to split open as he clenched his fists tightly. As expected, they're all a bunch of ambitious wolves. The information I have now is Shantian Manor's Manor Lord, Gung Pengcheng, was related to Concubine Sure. But I don't know if it was that Concubine Sure who gave the order to kill my mother. Concubine Sure? Chun-Yi's face darkened slightly. She's just a little concubine. How did she get involved with Shantian Manor? I also feel a little puzzled. Arbor lowered his eyes and said indifferently, so, Mama, I want to know why Mother left alone back then. Chapter 2653. I want to find the source. I will definitely be able to find the truth. I will definitely be able to find the murderer who killed her. Little Miss, come with me. Chun Kuei nodded and turned around to lead Arbor into the 2-story building. They went all the way to the 2nd floor and pushed open a door. Your mother used to live here. The furnishings in the room were very simple. It could be seen that Long Chuyun was not a person who paid much attention to details. So many years had passed, but the room was still clean and spotless. It could be seen how diligent Chun Kuei was in cleaning. Little Miss, sit. Chun Kuei invited Arbor to sit down. From the dressing table at the side, he picked up a well-made and meticulously carved rosewood box and came to Arbor's side. Pushing the box to Arbor's side, Chun Kuei sighed and said, "This is your mother's relic. Little Miss, you should keep it well." Arbor opened the box and looked inside. It was full of pearls and jade jewelry, which looked a little dazzling. There was also a compartment in the box. Arbor opened it and saw that it was a list of dowry. Glancing down 10 lines at a glance, Arbor looked up at Chun-Kei. These things are all mother's. Your mother left them for you. In the future, they will all be your dowry, including this Kai Dai Pavilion, Frustrated Pavilion, and so on. They are all mother's businesses. Yes. Chun-Kei opened the last compartment of the box, took out a stack of land deeds, and handed it to Arbor. A few years ago, Master came to ask for it, but I didn't give it to him. Chun-Kei sneered. At that time, when Master and I fought, I, a blind old woman, would have risked my life to protect Mrs. Things. Your eyes? Arbor was startled, and her fingers slightly shrank. That's not it. My eyes were not blinded by Master. Chun-Kei shook her head. Little miss, don't worry. I have the Scarlet Flame Fire Spitting Tiger, so I didn't suffer too much. I was injured, and Master was also injured. After that, he even sealed the road here and made Chasing Wind Garden a forbidden area for the Mu family. But this is also good. This way, there will be fewer people coming to make a fuss. Chun-Kei laughed mockingly. However, although the deeds are in our hands, those shops and fields are all managed by the Mu family. Arbor nodded. It's okay. Take your time. It's mine. I won't lose a single thing. Seeing that little Miss's attitude was so resolute, Chun-Yi's eyes couldn't help but light up slightly. She didn't know why, but although she had only interacted with Little Miss for a short while, she felt that as long as Little Miss said something, she would definitely be able to do it. Did Little Miss come into contact with anyone from the Imperial Capital's Long family after coming to the Divine Land? Arbor shook her head. The matter of going to the Long family to collect the debt was handled by Eunuch Chun. She didn't need to do it herself. A trace of coldness flashed past Chun-Kuei's eyes. Little Miss, if you meet people from the Long family in the future, don't be courteous to them. The reason why your mother left the Mu family back then was also because of the Long family's influence. Arbor was a little confused. Isn't the Long family mother's family? What kind of family is that? The Divine Continent's Imperial Capital's Long family is just a small branch family. Their bloodline is already very far away from the Long family's main family. A trace of disdain flashed past Chun-Kuei's eyes. Arbor blinked. Then where is my mother's family? The Sea of Forgetfulness. Chun-Kuei's eyes carried a faint yearning. Our home is in the Sea of Forgetfulness. Chapter 2654. The entire sea area is the Long family's territory above the 3 provinces. The current lord is your uncle, Long Chiyu. Arbor blinked, but before she could ask any questions, she heard Chun-Kei continue. More than 10 years ago, the Imperial Capital's Long family led a group of greedy people to the Sea of Forgetfulness to attack our home, wanting to plunder our resources. Although they didn't succeed in the end, the Sea of Forgetfulness suffered a great deal of damage. Our clansmen also suffered countless casualties, and in the end, all of them went into seclusion. Arbor's heart skipped a beat, and she stared at Chun-Kei expressionlessly. She felt that she seemed to have grasped some important information, and it flashed through her mind like a bolt of lightning. After your mother found out, she naturally wouldn't let it go. She gathered a group of forces under her and wanted to go to war with the Imperial Capital's Long family. Who knew that at this time, your father would actually drag her down? Together with the Mu family's elders, they strongly urged her to stop all her actions. They wanted your mother to swallow this anger alive. Your mother was forced by all of them. If they wanted to make a move against the Imperial Capital's Long family, they wanted her to leave the Mu family and not call herself a member of the Mu family. Those cowards didn't want to go against the Long family, the Gu family, and a few other families. They were afraid of becoming the target of public criticism. They were scared to death. Chun-Kuei's hands clenched tightly, and she fiercely clenched them together. Miss couldn't bear this anger, and in a fit of anger, she really left the Mu family. The most ridiculous thing was that this news was tightly suppressed after that. Other than your father and a few elders who knew about it, even the old patriarch who was in seclusion didn't know the reason at first. It wasn't until after he came out of seclusion that the old patriarch personally came to ask me, and I told him the truth. Only then did he feel ashamed and began to send people everywhere to look for you and your mother. At that time, your mother was condemned by everyone. Everyone said that your mother abandoned her husband and children and left the Mu family on her own because she didn't know filial piety, familial love, etiquette, justice, integrity, and shame. But who could understand your mother's pain? At that time, she was worried about your uncle and the others. She watched as her childhood home was destroyed by a group of bandits. How could she live in peace? Chun-Yi gritted his teeth and said, "Your father is really not a good person. Little miss, you don't know. Your uncle and the others weren't able to participate in the elders' secret meeting at that time. They simply didn't know why your mother left the Mu family by herself. After that, your father married Mu Qingya, the adopted daughter of the Mu family, as his second wife. Your third uncle and sixth uncle have always thought that it was Mu Qingya who was indecent and forced your mother to leave. Your father actually never explained anything and let Mu Qingya take the blame for this. Your father is really not a good person." As Chunyi said this, his teeth creaked. "It's hard on that child, Qingya. Why is she so helplessly following such an animal?" Chen Kuei said with a face full of regret. "Are you familiar with Mu Qingya?" Arbor raised his eyebrows and asked. Chunyi nodded and said with a sigh, "I only know that before a young miss married over, the two of them were recognized as a couple by the entire Mu family. But ever since the young miss married over, Qingya has been well-mannered and has kept a distance from your father. She also has an excellent relationship with your mother. Your mother has a cold and arrogant temperament. There aren't many people who can talk to her." Chapter 2655. No manners and abide by the rules. Arbor ruminated these words. Nanny couldn't have forgotten, right? Mu Rochuan, this eldest miss, is a few months older than me. She wasn't someone who knew her place, right? Otherwise, how could Mu Rochuan have been born before her? This Mu Qingya must have gotten together with Mu Jingfeng behind her mother's back without a proper reason. Chun Kuei stared blankly, then pulled Arbor's hand and said, "Little miss, I also know a little about this matter. You really can't blame Qingya. She's been the Mu family's adopted daughter since she was young. She can't open her mystic meridians and has no cultivation, so her life in the Mu family is very difficult. Fortunately, although she looks soft, she's actually a resolute and courageous woman. Usually, no one can bully her. She's very headstrong. Ever since your father married your mother, she cut the Gordian knot and stopped fooling around with your father. If it weren't for your father, that bastard, provoking an enemy and being drugged, hurriedly barging into Qingya's court and raping her without a care, how could he have harmed Qingya's entire life? She hasn't had a good time these years. She's worked like a horse for the Mu family for so many years, conscientiously helping your father take care of those shops, fields, and so on. She even has to raise concubines for your father. If it were your mother, she would have quit 180 years ago." Arbor coldly snorted. Chun Kuei continued, "Little miss, it's not that this old servant wants to speak ill of your father. This old servant feels that the one who sent people from Shuntian Prefecture to kill your mother is most likely that cowardly father of yours. He's an extremely conceited person. Your mother dared to directly leave the Mu family and didn't give him any face. He must have harbored a grudge in his heart and thought of a way to get rid of your mother." Arbor inwardly analyzed Chun Kuei's words and felt that what she said made some sense. Perhaps it really was her father's doing. Her father could casually throw out a few talismans or give out a few bottles of top-grade pills, and there would be plenty of people rushing to do things for him, right? "I understand," Arbor said indifferently. "Whether it's the Long family, Mu Qingya, or Mu Jingfeng, I'll get to the bottom of it." Chen Kuei looked at Arbor with a gratified expression and nodded. "If Miss is in heaven, she will definitely be happy." Arbor couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Mother won't be too happy. After all, her original intention was not to involve her in these matters. She only wanted her to live the rest of her life peacefully and comfortably. However, she still got involved. Arbor looked deeply at Chun Kuei. "Mama, The long family of the sea of forgetfulness you mentioned, is it the family that I am thinking of? Chinkoe could not help but be startled. He looked at Arbor and then laughed. Little Miss already has an idea in her heart. Isn't that so? Arbor sighed. He felt that a lot of his doubts had been resolved. It turned out that she actually had such a strange bloodline. It was truly amazing. No wonder she could feel that she could breathe freely and smoothly every time she entered the water. It was as if she was a fish in water. At this moment, she recalled Long Chiyun's last words when he took her in as a disciple. She couldn't help but feel a bit enlightened. Arbor shook his head emotionally. He looked at Chinkoe and said softly, "Mama, come back to Yulon Court with me." Chinkoe's old face, that was full of wrinkles, revealed a deep smile. This old servant is willing to follow Little Miss, and will not hesitate to go through water and tread on fire. Who want you to go through water and tread on fire? Arbor thought. She wanted her to live a comfortable life. Chapter 2656. Chinkoe said that she needed to pack her things, and then she would go to Yulon Court by herself. Arbor thought that since she had lived here for so long, she must have a lot of memories. Naturally, she had to say goodbye. After leaving Chasing Wind Garden, Xiao Mu looked back at the courtyard that was as dilapidated as a haunted house and narrowed her eyes. Back then, when her mother left the Mu family in a fit of anger, it actually involved some secrets of her maternal family. As a branch family, the Long family of the capital was willing to betray their own family members for some benefits. It must have been hard for them to live so well in the capital all these years. This karmic retribution really needed to be personally handled by her. When Arbor arrived at North Garden, it was already past lunchtime. When the old steward of North Garden saw that it was the little crown princess, he didn't dare to delay. He hurriedly welcomed her into the main room, and then went to invite the old patriarch over. Since Mutsong was waiting for his little granddaughter to come over to talk, he naturally wouldn't go into seclusion. Therefore, when the old steward came to report, he immediately went out of his room and hurried to the main room. Soon, Madame Gong arrived. Old Man Mu could see the little girl's cold figure from afar. She was sitting upright on the wooden armchair in the main room, her little face tense. He couldn't tell from her expression that she was happy or angry. Old Man Mu coughed softly and strolled into the room. He said with a smile, "Jojo, you're here to see Grandpa." Arbor nodded. "Where's the compensation? Don't tell me you haven't prepared it yet." Old Man Mu's mouth twitched. He felt that when the little girl said this, her expression was very calm. It was as if she had talked about the compensation with people countless times. "The compensation will be paid. It's all ready." Old Man Mu coughed softly and hurriedly turned to stride out. "Come, Jojo, with me." Arbor stood up expressionlessly and followed Old Man Mu out. They went to an open space behind the house and saw that it was full of supplies. Looking at the situation, it was indeed a lot more than the first time. The little fellow's mood finally improved a little. He nodded and said, It's pretty good. Move aside and let me collect it." The old man quickly nodded and took a step back. When he saw the little girl take out 4 or 5 blue storage talismans and toss them into the sky, he was shocked. The old man's eyes suddenly widened. What was going on? Since when did blue storage talismans become cabbages that could be found everywhere? Arbor's profound level storage talismans, made of ebony, had a storage space of over 100 cubic meters. 4 or 5 storage talismans were more than enough to store the items in front of him. However, such a large sum of money shocked the old man who was standing at the side. Jojo hadn't taken out the purple jade talisman to scare people yet. These were the blue talismans that he had drawn in the past that were unused. He gave them to her to use first. Old Master Lin stared at them without blinking for a while. He stepped forward excitedly and carefully sized up the talismans that were suspended in midair. This is... Old Master Lin pointed at them with trembling fingers. "This is a profound level storage talisman." The talisman power attached to it was indeed of the profound level. Heavens, why did this little fellow have so many blue storage talismans? In the entire talisman family, There were only 19 storage talismans that had been successfully made. It was just one blue storage talisman. Chapter 26:57. Moreover, the highest level blue storage talisman was only yellow level. It was made by a grand elder 100 years ago. Although the method of drawing the blue talisman had been passed down, none of his descendants had been able to make the blue storage talisman. Grandpa Moo looked at Arbor in surprise and delight. "Jojo, are these black-level blue storage talismans?" Arbor glanced at Grandpa Moo and thought for a moment. Then he took out 2 blue storage talismans from his pocket and tossed them to Grandpa Moo. Courtesy demands reciprocity. The corners of Old Master Moo's mouth twitched. He had the urge to laugh, but he felt gratified in his heart. Who said that his granddaughter was ignorant of the ways of the world and only knew how to maintain a poker face? Wasn't she very sensible? "Jojo, these blue storage talismans are? You drew them?" Grandpa Moo was too embarrassed to ask. He only probed with his eyes. "Yes." Arbor nodded his little head. "I drew them. I drew them. I drew them. I drew them, drew them, drew them, drew them." These words kept reverberating in Grandpa Moo's mind. They reverberated back and forth, almost as loud as the sound of magic. His calm old face gradually rippled with strangeness and astonishment. Then his expression froze in shock. Could it be that his ears weren't working well? Could it be that he was hallucinating? When he heard that his eldest granddaughter, Mu Rochuan, had drawn a high-level yellow storage talisman at Weishi Langfang, he was so happy that he almost couldn't speak. Rochuan was the only junior in the Mu family who could draw a storage talisman in recent years. Grandpa Moo was very gratified when he thought that Rochuan's future as a talisman master might be even better than Xing Chun. But now Roxian was nothing compared to the little girl in front of him. This little girl actually told him that she drew all the black-level blue storage talismans in front of him. Grandpa Moo was abnormally shocked. He was stunned by this news. That was a black-level blue storage talisman. Even the ancestors of the talisman aristocratic families in China had never drawn a talisman like that. The little girl looked at the old man with a strange expression. She saw that he was so agitated by the news that his mouth opened and closed, unable to speak. Arbor couldn't help but shove the 2 storage talismans into the old man's hands. He said expressionlessly, "Take it." Subconsciously, Grandpa Moo clutches the blue storage amulet in his hand. The little fellow asked Patriarch Moo to sit down at the stone table beside them. Then she sat down and said seriously, "Patriarch Moo, let's talk business now." Old Master Moo was stunned. When he heard her address him as Old Patriarch Moo, his mood stagnated a little, and he looked a little depressed. It seemed that the little guy still couldn't admit his grandfather's identity. But thinking about it, they had not known each other for more than 10 years. Who would be able to accept it so quickly? Don't worry, there's still a long way to go. The old man thought to himself. He would first slowly get to know the little fellow and let her guard down. If he treated her well, she would definitely be willing to call him grandfather in the future. "Child, tell me, if this old man can make a decision, I will definitely help you." Grandpa Moo nodded. The little girl took out the dowry list from the pear blossom wooden box and placed it in front of Grandpa Moo. "My mother's dowry is said to be for me." Patriarch passed down the order to have Mu Jingfeng prepare the accounts and show me the profits over the years. Chapter 26:58. The old man's mouth twitched fiercely. Great! His granddaughter's move was truly ruthless. The old man's eyelids twitched as he reached out to take the long list of dowry. He looked at it line by line, and the more he looked, the more black lines appeared on his forehead. Let's not talk about the other fields and shops. Just the 3 prosperous shops on Changle Street, the Kai-Dai Pavilion, the Frustrated Pavilion, and the Precious Painting Workshop. The little girl wanted to see the profits over the years and the account books. This was the highlight. The old man could almost imagine the boss jumping up and down immediately. He silently glanced at the little girl. The little girl's face was stoic as she expressionlessly said, "Old clan head, if you can't persuade Mu Jingfeng, then I can't do anything about it." I can only drag husband to beg his majesty in tears. After all, there are so many properties, but I haven't seen a single cent, so it's not very justifiable." The old man's mouth twitched again. His little granddaughter was clearly using peaceful means before resorting to force and threatening him. If his daughter-in-law's dowry was really brought up in front of his majesty, that would truly be embarrassing. In any case, that's how it is. The little girl indifferently said, "I'm not in a hurry either. It'll be fine to sort out the account books and profits within 5 days. You can decide what Mu Jingfeng wants to say on his side." The old man's forehead was filled with black lines. He inwardly thought, "It's only been 5 days, and you want to sort out all the things from the past years, yet you say you're not in a hurry?" However, he wasn't stupid. He naturally knew that the father and daughter had a deep knot in their hearts. The little girl was clearly not giving Jingfeng a good life by doing this. The eldest branch had lived such a prosperous and carefree life these past few years. If they had to spit out so much at once, the Mu family's old man himself didn't dare to imagine it. The little girl patted her, but went back in a good mood. She had said what needed to be said. As for whether they would do it or not, that was their business. Doing things obediently was one thing, but if they didn't, then it was a different story. In any case, she had a backup plan waiting for them. On the other side, in the Imperial Palace's Grand Hall, the air was so oppressive that one could practically hear a pin drop. Ever since the Crown Prince was summoned to the hall, the atmosphere gradually became heavy and frightening. The officials silently lowered their heads like quails, increasingly feeling that the atmosphere here was very stifling. After the Crown Prince went to the rear, he merely looked at everyone with a cold gaze and didn't say anything. This inexplicable pressure caused everyone to shut their mouths. Not speaking for a long time caused everyone's hearts to be hung high, filled with endless tension and oppression. Cough. Finally, someone couldn't take it anymore and coughed dryly. A man in a white robe, standing in the middle of the Heaven Origin main hall, stepped forward and cupped his hands. "Your Majesty, if you want to talk about punishment, the holy nun of my Heaven Origin Hall has suffered a lot while being locked up in the dungeon. She has also received the lesson she deserves. I wonder if your Majesty can Niawang let a group of disciples of the Divine Hall to slander, spread rumors, and abuse the Crown Princess in public. His crime is serious. You want to release him after 5 or 6 days? What do you think Shinjo is? How can you be so presumptuous?" Prince Amo finally opened his mouth. The moment he opened his mouth, he was merciless and angry. His eyes were so cold that it seemed like they were about to drop ice shards. The white-robed priest turned and bowed. "Your Highness, Yao Guang's saintess," Shimo Lian didn't listen to him. She waved her hand and said coldly, "I don't agree to let him go. Crown Prince, you presumptuous." Uniku scolded. "Tomorrow at 6 p.m. Chapter 2659. The white-robed priest took a step back with a rather displeased expression, the corners of his mouth twitching as if he wanted to say something. There were about a dozen disciples of the Sun Moon Temple standing in the Qianyuan Hall, led by an old man in brocade. At this time, the old man took a step forward and bowed to Mo Lian, then turned to the great emperor and said, just as our silver-ranked priest said, "The saintess slandered the crown princess on the street. It is indeed her fault. But after so many days, the punishment she has received should be enough. I ask the great emperor to let the saintess out for the sake of the good relationship between our temple and the divine continent." The great emperor pursed his lips and said nothing. No one could figure out what the great emperor was thinking at this moment. The silver-ranked priest could not help but say angrily, "I heard that our saintess was beaten up by the crown princess on the street." The silver-ranked priest used the word beaten. It was obvious that he was somewhat unable to suppress his anger. Thinking about it, the dignified saintess of the Sun Moon Temple, who represented the dignity and dignity of the temple, was beaten up like a dog by the divine continent's crown princess on the first day of her arrival in the capital. They had all heard that on that day, the crown princess very viciously slapped the saintess dozens of times, and finally took out the spiritual thunder talisman to kill many priests of the temple. This little crown princess was too vengeful. The saintess only committed the crime of speaking. Was there a need to be so ruthless? The most important news they heard was that the crown prince was actually an accomplice to the evildoer, allowing his concubine to do whatever she wanted and humiliate their saintess. It was really intolerable. The silver-ranked priest stood up with righteous indignation and said in a cold voice, "Your Highness the Crown Prince, His Majesty the Emperor of the Divine Continent. The saintess of our Sun-Moon Temple represents the existence of the Sun-Moon and the heavenly Tao, and is the holy source of the temple. These days, your divine continent has beaten her, imprisoned her, and humiliated her. This is already very infuriating. Now that our temple has proposed the terms of exchange, shouldn't you also take a step back? Isn't it a little unreasonable to refuse to let him go?" Prince Amo looked at the priest coldly. "Release them? Stop dreaming. Since this woman dares to slander my wife, then she can stay in prison for the rest of her life." The white-silver priest's expression changed slightly, and he couldn't help but blurt out, "Your Highness, can you make a decision on this matter?" There was a hint of disdain in his words. "If you can't make the decision, then shut up." The great emperor hadn't said anything yet. The silver-ranked priest sneered. The hall was silent, and all the officials lowered their heads in an instant. Prince Amo looked at him with a cold smile. His voice was neither loud nor soft, but it was cold enough to make people shiver. This person disobeyed this crown prince in front of everyone, so his crime is punishable by death. Where are the guards? Here. Dozens of purple forest guards rushed in from the entrance of the hall and surrounded the silver-ranked priest who had been blabbering nonstop the moment he entered the hall. Dozens of swords pressed down on the priest's neck, and he was forced to kneel on the ground with his hands behind his back. The silver-ranked priest's knees went soft, and he fell heavily on the ground. His entire face turned green, and he was sweating profusely. He hurriedly said, Great Emperor, what is the meaning of this?" Chapter 2660. The Crown Prince is treating me like this. Are you not going to do anything about it? The Emperor of the Divine Prefecture looked at him coldly. He sat on the throne, looking coldly at this audacious silver-ranked priest. A little priest of the Sun-Moon Temple dares to be so rude to the Crown Prince. The Emperor's voice was as cold as ice. He reached out to touch his forehead and subconsciously hit his aching head. He waved his hand in annoyance. "Go, bring me the bucket of bliss." The faces of the courtiers suddenly turned pale and ugly. A few timid courtiers were already standing in the back row, their bodies swaying as if they were on the verge of collapsing. Emo Yin knitted his brows and looked up at the son of the divine province sitting above. He had no idea what the barrel of bliss his father was talking about was. But looking at the courtiers' panicked expressions, it was obviously not something good. Soon, eunuch who directed 4 young eunuchs with pale faces to bring up a pitch-black wooden barrel that was as tall as a person. Dong! The wooden barrel landed on the ground, heavy as if it landed on everyone's hearts. They could not help but feel their hearts skip a beat. They felt an inexplicable sense of fear. At this moment, the entire hall was completely silent. Not a single sound could be heard. The silver-ranked priest seemed to feel something was wrong. His figure under the purple forest guard could not help but tremble. He hurriedly begged for mercy. "My respected emperor, I have no intention of looking down on the divine prefecture. Please understand, I have no intention of disobeying His Highness the Crown Prince." "Don't talk nonsense with him." The emperor felt a headache coming on. He waved his hand and said angrily, "Come, let the silver-ranked priest enjoy the world of bliss." Prince Kong, who was standing in the front row, raised his eyelids. He could not help but look up from the corner of his eyes. Prince Jian Pain, who was on the left, could not help but tremble. He took a step back. Emo Yin did not know what was going on. She watched as the crowd rushed forward and pulled the silver-ranked priest up. The silver-ranked priest kept crying with a pale face. Guardian Steward, save me, save me, Save me." The old man in embroidered robes from the Sun Moon Temple immediately reacted. He hurriedly stepped forward and shouted, "Your Majesty, please calm down, Your Majesty. Your Majesty, you can't do that. Your Majesty." The great emperor's face was cold. He didn't care about what the old man was saying. He stared coldly at the pitiful silver-ranked priest and said coldly, "No one can despise my son in front of me." The white-silver priest of Sun Moon Temple was drenched in cold sweat. He screamed and begged for mercy. Your Majesty, please spare my life, Your Majesty. Your Highness the Crown Prince. Your Highness the Crown Prince asks for your forgiveness. Guardian Steward, save me." Just as the old man took a step forward, a dozen purple forest guards pointed their swords at his chest. For a time, the atmosphere in the main hall revealed a state of mutual hostility. Emo Yin's face was cold and indifferent. She looked at everything as if she was an outsider. After the barrel of bliss was opened, the silver-ranked priest was immediately thrown in like trash. Soon, the entire Qianyuan hall was filled with the priest's exaggerated and painful screams. Chapter 26:61. Ah no, save me. Most of the priests in the Sun Moon Temple were ordinary people, and this silver priest cultivation was only at level 6 mystic cultivator realm. Although the officials on both sides didn't know what this priest was going through, they felt terrified just by hearing his screams. Everyone subconsciously took a few steps back. Emo Yin looked on coolly from the sidelines as a young eunuch picked up the bucket lid. His trembling body barely supported himself as he closed the bucket lid again. Qianyuan Hall fell into a deathly silence. Apart from the rustling sound of something crawling and biting in the barrel of bliss, the silver priest's screams faded bit by bit until they completely disappeared. The old officials were sweating profusely, and they were all about to cry. They knew that their emperor was very temperamental, but in recent years, the emperor's temper had really been restrained a lot. They didn't expect that such a terrifying scene would suddenly occur in the imperial court. Apart from being terrified, everyone's fear of His Highness the Crown Prince suddenly increased. Sure enough, father and son were father and son. The son's methods were vicious, but the father was even more vicious. Moreover, the emperor didn't seem to allow anyone to have any disrespect to the crown prince at all. Everyone was aware of this point and reminded themselves in their hearts, don't court death in front of His Highness the Crown Prince. Their emperor might go berserk at any time. The silver priest in front of them was their example. So, they must remember this. Jian Pain Wang wiped the cold sweat on his head and secretly glanced at the expressionless crown prince standing to the side. He felt even more stifled. As expected of the emperor's biological son, even this indifferent expression was almost the same. The Sun Moon Temple's embroidered elder clenched his fists tightly and forcibly suppressed his gushing anger. He tried to speak in a calm voice. The silver priest offended His Highness the Crown Prince of Guizhou, so he deserved more than death. But the holy nun is the symbol of our temple. I hope that Your Majesty will show mercy and magnanimity to spare her this time. The embroidered elder lowered his noble head and said indifferently, "Whatever compensation you want, please feel free to state it. As long as the temple can do it, we will definitely not refuse." The great emperor looked at the crown prince. "What do you think, crown prince?" "I don't agree to release him." It was still the same sentence and the same cold expression. The embroidered robed old man clenched his teeth and took a deep breath. For a long time, there was no sound in the hall. The embroidered robed elder took a few deep breaths before trying his best to calm his voice. "I know that the sage nun did something wrong and offended the crown princess. In that case, I wonder if we can invite Her Highness the Crown Prince Consort to come here. On behalf of the Sun Moon Temple, this old man is willing to offer a sincere apology to the crown princess and ask for her forgiveness." The courtiers wiped the cold sweat off their foreheads. He felt that the situation was developing in a strange direction. Was the Sun Moon Temple trying to court death again? If they thought that the little crown princess was easier to deal with, then They were gravely mistaken. The great emperor didn't say anything, but looked at his son again. Prince Mo's expression was indifferent as he stood ramrod straight in front of the hall. He swept a disdainful glance at the embroidered-robed elder. "What right do you have to say that you can see the crown princess whenever you want?" Chapter 2662. The crown prince consort doesn't have that much free time to listen to you people's nonsense. Hearing the crown prince's words, everyone wanted to ridicule him in their hearts. What was the crown princess busy with? She had just returned to the Mu family. What could she be busy with? She didn't have so much free time. She was just a little girl. At most, she would return to the Mu family to cultivate. What could she be busy with? The old man in embroidered clothes was the protector of the Sun Moon Temple. At this time, he also had a headache. His Highness the Crown Prince stubbornly refused to let go. And looking at the situation today, the great emperor would definitely not go against the Crown Prince's wishes. He couldn't help but take a long breath. Respectfully bowing to His Highness the Crown Prince, he said in the most sincere tone and attitude, "I hope your Highness can allow it. Sun Moon Temple is making this request with utmost sincerity." Putting down his pride and pleading like this was already the custodian's bottom line. He couldn't think of any other way to plead the Crown Prince to relent. Since the Crown Prince's path couldn't be taken, it was best to see the Crown Princess and take another path from her. Now he had nothing else to ask for. As long as the saintess of the temple was released, he could basically agree to any suitable conditions. And Mo Yin's eyes, without a trace of warmth, swept across the face of the protector of the Sun Moon Temple. She lowered her eyes and sneered. For a moment, the old man in embroidered clothes felt as if his chest was being pressed by something, and he couldn't breathe. After a long while, the Crown Prince raised his hand slightly, and a purple figure turned and walked out of the hall. The protector of the Sun Moon Temple looked at the Crown Prince with a complicated expression, and his heart couldn't help but tighten slightly. His Highness the Crown Prince of the Great Divine Continent, who had just returned, although he hadn't lived in the Divine Continent for a long time, the power of a superior was frightening. "Long time no see, my Chow parting line. Kai Xiao, I'm back." The little Crown Princess returned to Yulon Court from a north courtyard in a good mood. Hearing the voice, Kai Xiao and Kai Chi hurriedly ran out from the side room. "Crown Princess, you're back." Kai Xiao could not hide the worry in her eyes as she sized her up. Earlier on, they had already heard that the little Crown Princess had a conflict with the Mu clan's disciples in chasing Windgarden. They were worried about it, so they sent someone over to check on her. They did not expect the little Crown Princess to return so quickly. Kai Chi's face was full of joy as she held a plate of pastries in her hands. She smiled at Arbor and said, "Crown Princess, you came back just in time. These pastries are freshly made. Do you want to try one?" The little Crown Princess's eyes curved slightly. Just as she was about to nod in agreement, her expression suddenly changed slightly. She shouted at the two of them, "Get down." Kai Chi and Kai Xiao were both startled. Then they instinctively squatted down on the ground. They felt as if something had swept over their heads. It was accompanied by a fierce roar. The plate in Kai Xiao's hand shattered and fell to the ground. The thing that pounced over suddenly turned its head. A pair of scarlet eyes revealed traces of bloodthirst as it stared fiercely at Kai Chi, who was trembling all over. Without waiting for that guy to make a move, Arbor had already rushed forward. She had already summoned a ferrule in her hand, and without any explanation, a blue spiritual pure fire burned over. The raging fire suddenly wrapped around the figure that was about to pounce on him. A sharp roar resounded in everyone's ears for a long time. Kai Xiao and Kai Chi both covered their heads and lay on the ground. At this time, they couldn't hide the horror in their eyes as they turned their heads. Chapter 2663. The person in front of them gave them a huge shock. How is this still a person? The facial features on her face were already so distorted that it was almost impossible to distinguish her original appearance. In addition, her entire body was covered with blue veins, and the skin on her hands and body could clearly be seen bulging out like earthworms. Arbor's pupils slightly shrank. The development of corpse puppets to this day could be said to have completely surpassed what she had seen and experienced in her previous life. This should be a high-level corpse puppet, and, judging from its battle strength, it should be above level 2. Her speed, strength, and actual combat ability could already be compared to a level 14 or 15 Great Spirit Master. Arbor took a deep breath and subconsciously clenched her two small fists tightly. Just now, if she hadn't reacted extremely quickly and made Kai Xiao and Kai Chi lie down, the two girls would definitely have been scratched. Two fresh lives would have withered and withered in front of her eyes. Unforgivable, Arbor suddenly rushed forward, and with a stretch of her hand, the blue flames wrapped around the corpse puppet's body burned even more fiercely. "Crown Princess, be careful!" Kai Xiao cried out in alarm. At the side, Kai Chi also came back to her senses and carefully looked at the corpse puppet and couldn't help but whisper, "It's little Xing. This strange person is little Xing. Don't go near her." Arbor simply didn't remember who this little Xing was. In any case, in her eyes, a corpse puppet wasn't a person. The ferrule in her hand flew out and fell on the corpse puppet's back with a clap. Who would have thought that the thing's head could actually turn 360 degrees, and its skull, which was originally facing her, was now faintly looking at her with two eyes that were like will-o'-the-wisps. If it were someone else, they would have been frightened by this strange thing long ago. But the little crown princess was expressionless and directly flung out 4 or 5 attack talismans from her sleeves, mercilessly smashing them on the corpse puppet's head. Unfortunately, these few black-level attack talismans were still some distance away from dealing with a level 14 or 15 Great Spirit Master. After all, those blue attack talismans had inherited more than 80% of Arbor's strength, and these talismans could at most deal with a level 7 or 8 Great Spirit Master. Against a rank 3 advanced corpse puppet that was equivalent to a rank 14 or 15 Great Spirit Master, it was still a bit too weak. However, the power of these few attack talismans was naturally able to obstruct the corpse puppet. At this moment of obstruction, Xiao Mu had already pinched out a blue fireball and flung it at the zombie's head with a smack. Unexpectedly, this attack did not cause any damage to the corpse puppet at all. Instead, it angered her a little. That guy turned his head and stared at her with a pair of dead fish eyes. A very strange hissing sound came from his throat. Suddenly, the zombie's tongue stretched out from its open mouth like a tape measure. There was a disgusting sarcoma in the middle of its tongue. Xiao Mu had been concentrating on this ugly person the entire time. When she saw her pounce on her and open her mouth, she promptly shot out 7 to 8 white bone nails without any explanation. The white bone nail was Duan Yu's unique concealed weapon. The nail was white in color, slender, and had extremely strong penetrative power. Just one nail was enough to make a person wish they were dead. Moreover, each nail pierced through that monster's long tongue at close range, eliciting waves of manic roars from her. However, what terrified Kai Xiao and Kai Chi was that the crown princess had clearly shot several concealed weapons into little Xing's mouth. But she could still move. Arbor narrowed his eyes, and a thought flashed through his mind. Chapter 2664. It seemed that this thing's body's toughness had increased quite a bit again. A dozen or so thin icicles drilled out of Arbor's right hand. He stared coldly at this high-level zombie. The icicles abruptly shot towards the zombie's head. The zombie roared angrily and abruptly pounced forward after accumulating power. Bang! Arbor raised his hand and released a crow-gold arrow at her. The icicles in his hand uniformly flew into the zombie's head. Hello! The high-level zombie shrieked, and its body crashed to the ground uncontrollably. It still wanted to struggle. Arbor had already swept up to it and ruthlessly smacked its head with his ferrule without hesitation. The rolling power of the Earth Spirit was instantly activated and smashed onto the zombie's body in an overwhelming manner. The high-level zombie was pressed to the ground, and it struggled with all its might to shake its body before pouncing with a howl. When Mu Qingya, who had rushed over after hearing the news, rushed into the Magnolia enclosure with a group of Mu family guards. She happened to see a monster baring its fangs and brandishing its claws as it pounced in the little stoic's direction. In the blink of an eye, the little stoic flipped her left hand to gather the power of the earth spirit. She clenched her fist tightly and once again punched the charging high-level zombie. The earth spirit condensed into a huge stone slab and smashed down, landing on the head of the corpse hag in a frenzy. What was even more frightening was that the instant the giant stone slab smashed the zombie and shattered into pieces, a long sword condensed from the earth spirit pierced through the millions of pieces and abruptly pierced through the zombie's deformed head without warning. After the spiritual energy dissipated, only the fist-sized zombie crystal core remained on the ground, emitting a faint glow. Behind Mu Qingya, the Mu family disciples who had barged in couldn't help but narrow their pupils. Setting aside the little fellow's outburst of ruthlessness towards Mulder at the entrance of Lushan Gate. This should be the first time they witnessed the little stoic's black-hearted, ruthless, and decisive battle state. Mu Qingya hurriedly called the disciples of the Mu family in and asked with a serious face, "Chow Chow, what happened?" Arbor turned to look at her. "Burn it." Mu Qingya nodded and carefully moved a few steps forward. A middle-aged man immediately walked out from behind her and stopped her. "Madam, be careful." "No, it's fine. You should be dead." Mu Qingya took 2 more steps forward and couldn't help but look at Arbor. "Jojo, what the hell is this?" "This is little Xing, the girl who was sent back to Madam." Qiaomu gazed at her and remarked apathetically, "I also want to know why she mutated into a zombie while still alive." Mu Qingya was shocked. "Zombies?" Arbor nodded. "Corpse puppets can capture people and infect them with corpse poison. It will gradually turn your divine land into a land of corpses. There will be devastation everywhere, despair everywhere. Life will be filled with fear and darkness, and there will be no more light." With every few words, she took a step forward until she was right in front of Mu Qingya. She stared at her like this, and time seemed to freeze. Everyone simultaneously shuddered. They only felt that the little girl's eyes were eerie and sinister when she said this, causing fear and panic to rise in their hearts. "No, Jojo, you probably misunderstood something," Mu Qingya hastily explained with an anxious expression. "If you're talking about that girl, little Xing, I have a bit of an impression of her. Ever since you chased her out of Yulan Court, I locked her up in the woodshed." Chapter 2665. I plan to find the slave trader 2 days later and sell that lass along with a few troublesome servants. Then I plan to buy a few clever maids and manservants. Mu Qingya hurriedly explained, "I really don't know how things ended up like this." "Oh." However, Arbor didn't seem to believe her and coldly swept her gaze over her. "According to what you said, you didn't care about her after throwing her into the woodshed?" Mu Qingya nodded, looking anxious and worried that explaining too much would cause Arbor to be disgusted. Her fists were tightly clenched together, and her breathing was somewhat unstable. The middle-aged man behind her, Mu Liang, couldn't stand it anymore and said with a frown, "Crown Princess, Madam is in charge of the entire Mu family's affairs and has many chores every day. Xiao Xing is merely a little girl, so how could Madam keep an eye on the woodshed?" "Something must have gone wrong," Lin Feng said. Mu Liang cupped his hands and said, "If the Crown Princess trusts this subordinate, then let this subordinate go to the woodshed to investigate." This Mu Liang was her father's subordinate, so his words were rather pertinent. Arbor wasn't an unreasonable person. Without any evidence, he wouldn't wrongly accuse Mu Qingya. Hearing this, he nodded. "Madam Mu, there's no need to mind. If you want to investigate, go ahead. In any case, they probably wouldn't be able to find anything. No matter who did it, they definitely wouldn't leave behind any clues." "Jojo." Mu Qingya's expression was somewhat hesitant and sad. "Actually, you can lower your guard a little and look at the people around you." "What's wrong?" Mu Xingqian quickly entered Yulan Court, followed by Mu Jingrui and Mu Jingyuan. The 3 were already on their way to Yulan Court, so when they heard such a big commotion, they immediately rushed over. Mu Qingya quickly stepped forward and took the initiative to explain the situation to the three. Mu Xingqian and the others hurriedly stepped forward and turned Xiaoxing's body over. When they saw her strange appearance, and their gazes fell on the half of her tongue that had fallen out, their hearts all trembled. How could she still be considered a person? Mu Liang, have you searched the woodshed? This subordinate will go right away. Jojo. Mu Xingqian walked to her side. You must be frightened. I'm not scared. I'm just a little annoyed. I'm a little disappointed in the Mu family. Arbor said coldly, I've only lived here for a day, and 2 of my maids were almost scratched by zombies. This makes me very suspicious about the safety of your Mu family's backyard. If you don't want me to stay, you can just say so. It's not like I have to stay here, Arbor said coldly. You don't have to use such underhanded means. Song Lu, Mu Qingya's maid, couldn't stand it anymore. She stood up and said angrily, Crown Princess, what do you mean by that? Mu Liang has already explained earlier, yet you still suspect our madam? It must have been difficult for madam to treat you so wholeheartedly. As soon as you moved into Yulan Court, she was busy preparing this and that for you. She was afraid that she might neglect you. Shut up, Mu Qingya reprimanded and turned to look at Arbor apologetically. Apologies, Jojo. The maid doesn't know etiquette. I hope you won't lower yourself to her level. Arbor nodded. Of course I won't bicker with her over such trivial matters. Everyone's lips twitched. You really hit the nail on the head. Chapter 2666. My 2 maids were badly frightened. Compensate them accordingly. Arbor waved his hand. If there's nothing else, please, remember to burn this thing. Arbor's frosty eyes stared straight at Mu Qingya and the others. Don't let them come back to life again. Mu Qingya shuddered. She knew that if Xiaoxing made any more mistakes, the little crown princess would definitely pin all the blame on her as the mistress of the household. She took a deep breath. Don't worry, Jojo. I'll watch them burn it with my own eyes. Arbor nodded and turned to look at Mu Xingqian. Is there anything else? Mu Xingqian felt a bit uncomfortable when he saw that she was still keeping him at arm's length. Mother doesn't have any ill intentions towards you. Mother sincerely wants to get along well with you. If you're willing to accept others, you'll find that there are many people in this world who want to treat you well. Arbor glanced at him mockingly. Is there something wrong with your brain? Do you want me to remind you again? My mother died a long time ago. Mu Xingqian remained silent. Scram! Arbor roared at him. His cold gaze was like a knife that stabbed into Mu Xingqian's heart. He was actually despised by his own sister. A black figure climbed onto the roof. Seeing so many people in the courtyard, he couldn't help but be startled. He then bowed and said, Reporting to the Crown Princess, His Highness invites you to Qianyuan Grand Hall. Arbor glanced sideways at the youth and nodded. Amen. Prepare the carriage. Prepare the carriage for the Crown Princess. Hurry. Mu Xingqian watched as his little sister walked past him with an indifferent expression. His expression was a little blank for a moment. Mu Jingrui stepped forward and patted his shoulder comfortingly. Mu Qingya tightly clenched her wrist and suppressed her anger as she said, Investigate Xiaoxing's matter. Get to the bottom of it. I want to know who's playing tricks in the dark. To actually do this in front of the Crown Princess. Madam, Song Lu called out pitifully. Shut up. How unruly. It's my fault for indulging you guys too much. How dare you be so impudent in front of the Crown Princess? After you go back, you will have to copy the family rules 100 times, and half a month's salary will be deducted. If you dare to be so presumptuous in the future, I will not let you off so easily. Song Lu retreated sobbing. Mu Qingya, on the other hand, was still angry. She reached out to press on her chest, feeling a little dizzy. Mu Xingqian reached out to support her, but the word mother was suddenly stuck in his throat. When he thought of his younger sister's expression just now, as if she was looking at an enemy, he inexplicably couldn't bring himself to call her mother. Arbor left the noisy courtyard and took a carriage to the imperial palace. He was welcomed into the Heaven Origin Great Hall without any obstructions. At this time, the sun was shining brightly. The entire hall was enveloped by a layer of sunlight. Golden roof, red door, coral window. The cornice curled up and the grandeur was magnificent. Following the announcement, Arbor strode in with vigorous steps. Apart from a few old censors who had seen the little crown princess before, who had calm expressions, the other ministers couldn't help but sneak a glance. This was the little crown princess who had beaten the holy nun of the temple to the point that even her mother couldn't recognize her. When the crown prince saw that his wife had arrived, his eyes couldn't help but light up. Everyone inexplicably felt a trace of a spring breeze. The low pressure that had been pressing down on them just now was suddenly swept away. Wasn't this too exaggerated? Chapter 2667. Mo Lusheng, who was sitting on the dragon throne in the main hall, saw his son's good-for-nothing appearance and couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. Hu Dequan, who was standing at the side, saw this and hurriedly stepped forward. He took out a small purple gold cauldron from his sleeve and presented it to the great emperor with both hands. Mo Lusheng nodded. Hu Dequan reached out and opened the lid of the small cauldron. He brought the small purple gold cauldron in front of the great emperor and let Mo Lusheng take a breath. Arbor cast a cold glance in that direction. A faint fragrance wafted into her nose, causing Xiao Mu to involuntarily crease her brows. Her fingertips brushed lightly, and a faint medicinal fragrance flowed, immediately sweeping away the fragrance. She didn't like to be contaminated with some inexplicable smell. Mo Yin held her hand and paused slightly, then raised her head to look at her father on the throne. At this time, Hu Dequan had already taken back the small purple gold cauldron, and the great emperor's expression seemed to be much better, putting down the hand that had been rubbing his head. The young couple silently looked at each other and couldn't help but shift their gaze to Hu Dequan. The latter's body stiffened slightly under their sharp gazes, and the chubby claws under his sleeves couldn't help but tighten. What happened? Why were the crown prince and crown princess looking at him with such sharp gazes? Hu Dequan felt a trace of inexplicable fear. He was really scared out of his wits by those two masters along the way. Now, he wanted to be on good terms with the crown prince and crown princess. How would he dare to offend them? At this time, he was even more confused. But fortunately, the young couple glanced at him and immediately retracted their gazes. The steward of the Sun Moon Palace took a step forward and bowed to the young crown prince consort. Your Highness the Crown Prince Consort, I am Steward Wen Quan of the Sun Moon Palace. Arbor immediately understood why the Crown Prince wanted to bring her to Qian Yuan Hall. Manager Protector Wen Quan continued, Crown Prince Consort, please allow me to apologize to you. On behalf of my saintess, I would like to express my deepest apologies for my rude words earlier. Now, the saintess has received the punishment she deserves. Do you think we can not dead? Arbor turned to look at the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince shook his head and asked, Do you want her dead? Arbor nodded. Die. Everyone was suddenly speechless. They secretly raised their heads and glanced at the cruel couple. What kind of godly development was this? Wasn't someone apologizing to her and begging her to let the saintess off? But this the little Crown Princess suddenly said the two words die in all seriousness, causing everyone present to feel a chill run down their spines. Why did the scene suddenly seem a little funny? It should have been a very tragic thing, but when a crown princess said it so bluntly, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Manager Wen Quan was stunned for about 3 seconds before he hurriedly said, Crown Princess, no. You, Sir Jojo stretched out a small palm and made a shut-up gesture. Crown Prince Mo lowered his eyes slightly, suppressing the urge to laugh in his belly. Nie Yaoguang spread rumors the moment she entered the capital, saying that I'm a disaster. Arbor said mildly. I think before she said this, she was already prepared to die. Everyone, we actually have nothing to say in response. When Quan saw her determined expression, as if she really wanted to kill Nie Yaoguang, he couldn't help but feel a little anxious. Chapter 2668. Crown Princess. The temple is willing to use 1/10 of Chess Mountain's mining rights in exchange for the Holy Nun's life. Manager Wen Quan had no other choice and hurriedly brought out his trump card. As soon as these words were spoken, All the ministers in the hall began to whisper to each other in whispers. That was 1/10 of Chess Mountain's mining rights, which brought a lot of benefits to the imperial court every year. With so many spirit stones, it was enough to supply 10,000 people in the elite camp. A minister standing behind the king of Giant Pain quickly elbowed the king of Giant Pain's waist. The king of Giant Pain's face was dark, and he didn't want to speak. Hadn't he suffered enough losses at the hands of the young couple? Whoever opened their mouth would be unlucky. He wasn't a big fool, so why should he jump out and be the bird that stuck its head out? Prince Kong stood beside the king of Giant Pain. Seeing the king of Giant Pain's expression of, "I'll hold it in, I'll hold it in, I'll hold it in," he couldn't help but secretly twitch the corner of his mouth, thinking, the youngest IQ has risen in a straight line. Today's matter, he actually didn't jump out and criticize the crown princess. It can be seen that he's starting to grow brains. No matter how Prince Kong ridiculed, the king of Giant Pain stood there calmly, watching the show without moving. Are you kidding me? Criticize the crown princess. He still freaking owed the crown prince Consort a debt. If he criticized her now, wouldn't he be in a hurry to be criticized back? Moreover, he would definitely be forced to repay the debt in advance. Humph. He wouldn't say anything. Whoever wanted to fight for this 1/10 of the spiritual stone mine for the imperial court would have to fucking do it themselves. The official behind the king of Giant Pain was somewhat anxious. He glanced sideways at the few imperial censors behind him and saw that each and every one of them was looking down at their noses. It was obvious that they would not open their mouths to speak. He could not help but feel stifled. What was going on with these imperial censors, who were usually the last ones to jump up and down to criticize others? Recently, they were so well-behaved that it almost made people suspicious. Lord Jojo turned to look at the crown prince, but the crown prince shook his head at her and said, "Up to your mood." Obviously, that 1/10 of the spiritual stone mine's mining rights to Prince Mo wasn't even worth a single strand of hair on his wife's head. The ministers silently glanced at His Highness the Crown Prince. His Highness's attitude of spoiling his wife was to the heavens. Left Prime Minister Chen Chaoji was over 50 years old and had a strong body. Seeing that no one dared to speak, he stepped out of the crowd and bowed to the great emperor. "Your Majesty, I think that we can consider the Divine Hall's offer." The great emperor waved his hand. Let the crown prince handle this matter himself. Thus, everyone shut their mouths. The great emperor's words revealed his intention to protect his own. It couldn't be any more obvious. This meant that the crown prince and his wife would be fully in charge of the Divine Hall. Regardless of whether they accepted the compensation or not, it was the crown prince and his wife's business. Chen Chaoji frowned and turned to Prince Mo with cupped hands. "Your Highness, the 1/10 mining rights of Chess Mountain, to us. Half." Arbor suddenly interrupted Chen Chaoji, her crisp voice resounding in the hall. "He also wants to give us 2 quotas to enter the Sun-Moon Mystery Realm," the crown prince added. Arbor turned and glanced at the crown prince. Although she didn't know what the Sun-Moon Mystery Realm was, since her husband had mentioned it, he must have his reasons. The Sun-Moon Divine Hall's guardian was so angry that he was trembling all over. Even the tips of his fingers couldn't help but tremble. He was angered by that couple. An exorbitant demand, absolutely exorbitant demand. Chapter 2669. Who would have thought that this couple would be so shameless? They really dared to say anything? Half of the mining rights of Chess Mountain's Spirit Stone Mine. Ha ha ha. Ha. They were really impressive. They asked for half of Chess Mountain's mining rights right away. What a fool's dream. And I want to choose this half of the area myself, Arbor added. The custodian was so angry that he didn't want to say another word to her. Not only did this whimsical couple want half of Chess Mountain's mining rights, but they also wanted a spot to enter the Sun-Moon Mystery Realm. Haha, how was that possible? The Sun-Moon Mystery Realm was the best cultivation place that the Sun-Moon Temple had. The Mystery Realm opened once every 10 years, and it was never open to people outside the temple. What made them think that they could get a spot to enter the Mystery Realm? Sir Jojo blinked and nodded his little head in approval. And a spot to enter the Sun-Moon Mystery Realm. Although he had never heard of this mystery realm, any place that had the name of a mystery realm would definitely have great opportunities and treasures. Sir Jojo felt that it was good. Don't even think about it. Custodian Wen Quan, who was panting, couldn't help but roar angrily. Then let's not talk about it. Sir Jojo waved his little hand and shouted, "Men, bring Nye Yaowang here and execute him immediately." Everyone fell silent. The little crown princess was too dramatic. She didn't even give others a chance to think before saying this. The officials silently glanced at Steward Wen Quan, whose head was emitting green smoke, and lowered their eyes one by one without any moral integrity. You. Faced with such a bad attitude, the steward and the protector were so angry that they were about to ascend to the heavens. However, the crown prince was right beside the little crown princess. Looking at the crown prince's protective expression, if he dared to yell at the little crown princess, he would be the next one to enter the barrel of bliss. Forget it. He had to lower his head when he was under someone else's roof. He couldn't afford to offend him, so he could just hide. Holding his breath, the custodian nodded with great difficulty and said, This matter is of great importance. I must ask the hall master before I can make a decision." The little crown princess nodded. "All right, go back and think about it. Give me an answer before tomorrow morning. If you exceed the time limit, I will send you the sage nun's head." Everyone fell silent again. Manager Protector Wen Quan gnashed his teeth in anger. If he didn't make this trip today, the young crown prince consort might have already forgotten about Nye Yaowang. Instead, it reminded this strange crown princess that she wanted to kill Nye Yaowang. Was he rushing here to be tortured? The people from the Divine Hall were so angry that they left the hall without looking back. The Heaven Origin Grand Hall quieted down again, without a trace of sound. The strange crown princess said to the emperor, "Father, if there's nothing else, my husband and I will go back first. We'll come to see you in 2 days." Mo Lushing looked at his daughter-in-law, speechlessly. Apui, not a daughter-in-law. She hadn't passed the 3rd test yet, so she wasn't a daughter-in-law. After saying that, Lord Jojo stomped in front of Hu Dequan and stretched out a white and tender hand. Hu Dequan was baffled and asked with trepidation, "Crown Princess, what do you want?" Mo Lushing waved his hand speechlessly and sighed. "Give that purple gold cauldron to her. Give it to her. Hurry and send this weirdo away. What to do if it stings my eyes?" Chapter 2670. Hu Dequan had an incredulous expression on his face as he reached out to take out the purple gold cauldron from his sleeve and handed it over to Lord Jojo with trembling hands. This strange little crown princess even wanted to freaking steal the emperor's medicine. Too shameless. Her shamelessness knows no bounds. Mo Lien lowered his eyes as the corners of his mouth twitched imperceptibly. He thought that imperial father must be on the verge of a mental breakdown right now. However, Lord Jojo must have her own reasons for doing this. He definitely had to support his little wife. Arbor received the purple gold cauldron from Hu Dequan with a serious expression. Seeing Hu Dequan's trembling appearance, he couldn't help but frown. "I won't eat you. What are you trembling for?" All the officials in the hall looked up at the sky, speechless. Was Eunuch Hu trembling in fear? This strange little crown princess. Can't you tell that she's trembling in anger? Arbor took out a small white porcelain bottle from his pocket and tossed it to Hu Dequan. 1 pill every 3 days. Don't overdo it. After saying that, he didn't care whether the dazed Hu Dequan understood or not. He directly turned around and stomped back to the crown prince's side. The crown prince beamed as he held her little hand and waved at Hu Dequan. "Remember the crown princess words. Give it to imperial father." Then, the young couple walked out of the hall hand in hand. When they passed by the king of Giant Pain, they didn't forget to turn a glance at him and say, "Imperial uncle, remember to pay your debts. Our eunuch Chun is out collecting debts every day. It's very tiring. You must all be more aware and don't give us trouble." "Imperial uncle, did you hear what my wife said? The deadline is almost up. Remember to quickly prepare it and send it over. Don't make everyone look bad." Strange, why did the king of Giant Pain suddenly tremble as well? The young couple looked at each other and walked out while muttering, "Husband, the people in the hall are always trembling. I think it's because they're weak and can't sleep at night, causing some neurological disorders." Emollien's mouth twitched. "Do you have medicine? I'll fucking cure your sister." The ministers cursed in their hearts in anger. Was his body weak? This weird couple, they were just angry, okay? It wasn't until the two of them left that the palace regained a bit of life. The right Prime Minister Gao, glanced at the Prince of Giant Pain, who was standing beside him, trembling with anger. The corner of his mouth twitched as he comforted, "Your Highness, don't be angry, don't be angry. The little crown princess is still young. Children don't know any better. Don't be angry, don't be angry." JoJo's section break. Taiji Palace of Phoenix Emperor City. As Duan Yu flipped through the invitation letter in his hand, his gaze landed on a certain heir sitting across from him, who was leisurely sipping tea from a cup. "You're going to?" Prince Qing put down his cup and nodded. Must I go?" The Crown Prince of King Qing nodded again. "Yes." "What's the point?" "Yes." Rong Qing gave him a clear answer. When the three provinces gather, the winds and clouds change. Whoever obtains first place on the Heavenly Prime roll will be able to obtain large amounts of resources and benefits for the province they belong to. This is a checkpoint to test each prince's ability. So, the Crown Prince and the Second Prince also have to go. Rong Qing shook her head. "Those who weren't chosen naturally can't go." Duan Yu nodded, and his eyes brightened. "They will also go." Rong Qing looked at him in confusion. Chapter 2671. Members of the Divine Province's Imperial Family. As long as they are talented enough, they will be invited. "That bastard will definitely be invited," Duan Yu murmured with certainty. "If he is invited, the little fellow will definitely go as well." Rong Qing glanced at His Highness. "Are you talking about the Crown Princess of the Divine Province? If the Crown Princess cultivation isn't high and she doesn't have any special skills, she probably won't be invited." Duan Yu glared daggers at Rong Qing like he was looking at an idiot, but the latter was baffled. "Go ask around and see if they're going or not. To say that is JoJo's cultivation isn't high, pooh." Rong Qing was instantly speechless. "You're trying to say that if those two from the Divine Province aren't going, you won't go either?" Duan Yu nodded. "That's right." His matter-of-fact attitude was simply baffling. Rong Qing glanced at the willful His Highness the Fourth Prince helplessly and obediently went out to ask around. On the other side, Arbor and the Crown Prince boarded the return carriage and squeezed to the Crown Prince's side. She looked at him curiously and asked, "Is there some great treasure in the Sun-Moon mystic realm?" The Crown Prince couldn't help but chuckle. "I heard that there's a pair of very powerful weapons that have been passed down for several millennia." "Oh, can it be more powerful than my ferrule?" "That is a weapon created by heaven and earth and formed from the essence of the sun and moon. It is naturally much more powerful than man-made weapons." Arbor's heart skipped a beat, and she looked down at her palm. "What is it?" Emollien asked in confusion. The little fellow shook her head and raised her head proudly. "I also have a weapon that is naturally formed. I estimate that it is also several millennia old." Prince Mo blinked. "Can you call out for hubby to see?" Sir Jojo instantly drooped his head like a wilted eggplant. "I can't call it out for the time being." Prince Mo couldn't help but chuckle. He hugged her and rubbed her head. "It's fine, we'll talk about it when you can call it out." Arbor nodded and asked curiously, "Since that pair of weapons is so powerful, why haven't they been taken away by the Sun-Moon Temple yet?" Emollien scoffed. "Because they never found that pair of Sun-Moon wheels from beginning to end." "I see." Jojo nodded in understanding. He thought to himself, that must be because this pair of heaven-defying weapons is no longer interested in those weaklings. The Sun-Moon Temple has always been stingy, sneaking into the secret territory and never opening it to outsiders. "Do you think they will compromise this time?" "I will." Prince Mo nodded confidently. Just by looking at how nervous they were about the Saintess, it was obvious, wasn't it? The Saintess's cultivation wasn't that great, and from the looks of it, she was a little stupid. Why did the temple want to exchange her back at all costs? Arbor's eyes flashed. The carriage stopped in front of the Mu estate. Emolian jumped down and reached out to carry the little fellow who was bending down to get out of the carriage. She put her on the ground and held her little hand as they walked towards Yulon Court. Along the way, they were naturally secretly watched by others. But no one dared to say much. When they occasionally saw them, they all obediently bowed to the two. The two walked hand in hand as usual, but in the eyes of others, it was definitely the crown princess pulling the crown prince everywhere to show off to the Mu family. Just as they stepped into the court, Arbor heard a roar of unfilial daughter. Chapter 2672. He looked up and saw Mu Jingfeng rushing out of Yulon Court. His hair stood on end, and his eyes were filled with rage. However, when Mu Jingfeng met the crown prince's cold and still eyes, his expression could not help but turn awkward. Why did the crown prince return? Didn't he hear that he went to Qian Yuan Palace to discuss politics with his majesty? Mu Jingfeng's furious breath abruptly stopped, and his cold and angry expression also froze on his face. He cupped his hands toward the crown prince. "Your Highness." Prince Mo coldly exchanged glances. "May I know the reason for family head Mu's sudden visit?" Mu Jingfeng choked and awkwardly chuckled. "Your Highness, this one came to find the crown princess to discuss some matters." Arbor pulled Prince Mo's hand and walked into the main hall. He directly sat down on a chair and did not even look at him. Such a contemptuous attitude angered Mu Jingfeng so much that his teeth ached, and his expression became increasingly unsightly. "Family head Mu, speak if you have something to say," Prince Mo coldly said. Mu Jingfeng took a deep breath. He was muddled from anger earlier, so he rushed to Yulon Court to question Arbor in a moment of impulse. Now that he had calmed down, he was more rational. "Crown Princess, did you tell your grandfather that you want to retrieve your mother's dowry?" Arbor nodded. "What's the problem?" The old man's efficiency was pretty good. She had only mentioned this matter to him in the afternoon, and Mu Jingfeng had already rushed over to find her in the evening. That unfilial daughter earlier was clearly Mu Jingfeng's truest thought. Arbor coldly curled his lips. Mu Jingfeng was so angry at this unfilial daughter's attitude that the veins on his forehead were throbbing. How could she still ask him so calmly? What was the problem? Didn't she find it laughable to ask such a question? Mu Jingfeng took a deep breath and restrained his temper as he said to Arbor, "Your mother's dowry, so many shops and estates, were all taken care of by Qingya all these years. If it weren't for Qingya's good management, it wouldn't have become such a prosperous shop today. Yes, I will pay her the management fee," Arbor said lightly. "As for the price, she will definitely be satisfied." Mu Jingfeng was so angry that smoke started coming out of his head. Pay management fees? The counteroffer was satisfactory? What did this girl take Qinya for? A servant? Or a hired worker? He actually dared to say such a weird thing. Xiaomu took out that rosewood box and opened it, taking out a stack of house deeds. She then remarked apathetically, "Mu Jingfeng, you aren't thinking of swallowing your ex-wife's meager dowry and private property, right? If that's the case, then I'll have to find the capital governor and ask him clearly." Arbor said faintly, "If I remember correctly, according to the laws of Shenzhou, dowry is a private property inherited by the daughter after the death of the wife. My mother's private property is naturally mine. Do you think it's appropriate for you to use my things to raise your beautiful wife, concubine, and concubine's children?" Mu Jingfeng's face turned red from anger. This girl's words were too harsh and direct. If it were someone else, they would definitely not say it so bluntly and leave no leeway for others to mediate. This was a slap to the face. Who could endure it? Moreover, Mu Jingfeng had been the Mu family's head for many years. Deep down, he was already an extremely proud person. How could he endure being ridiculed by his daughter? He recalled how his daughter had pointed at his nose and angrily rebuked him. "You're useless," at the entrance of Lu Shengmin, and an inexplicable rage immediately rose in his chest. Chapter 2673. "Shut up!" Mu Jingfeng bellowed and pointed at Arbor. Why, you unfilial daughter? You're the debt collector your mother gave birth to. Arbor's eyes instantly revealed an ominous glint, and he jumped up from his chair. Try pointing at me and scolding me again? Mu Jingfeng was stunned, and he clenched his fists tightly. You were able to force my mother out of the Mu family back then, so you can naturally force me out today, Arbor coldly said. But I'm not a good-tempered woman like my mother. If you force me into a corner and anger me, I'll make sure your entire Mu family will never have a day of peace. You, Mu Jingfeng was so angry that his vision turned black. This daughter was really born to collect debts. Arbor's face was cold as he angrily berated. Mu Jingfeng, listen well today. Sort out the accounts of all the businesses and the profits over the years within 3 days. Once the time is up, immediately hand them over to me for a look. Don't refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. I'm reminding you again, my mother's gentle and good-tempered days are over. She coldly looked at him and sternly said, I'll have the final say in everything from now on. Jingfeng, Mu Qingya, Mu Xingqian, and Mu Roxuan rushed in together. She hurriedly stopped the red-eyed Mu Jingfeng and gently said, Jingfeng, let's talk things out. Jingfeng, don't be like this. What can't father and daughter talk about openly? Scram. Arbor's hair stood on end. His body was covered in sharp thorns, and whoever he poked would be unlucky. Stop acting like a virtuous wife and filial son in front of me. I'm warning you one last time. Hand over the things obediently, and we can still continue to be friends. Otherwise, we'll fight to the death and be irreconcilable. Even if I have to burn and smash these things, I won't let you off a single bit. Mu Xingqian's heart tightened, and he hurriedly looked up. Jojo, that's all I have to say today. I'll send someone to hand over all the accounts later. Arbor stared coldly at the trembling Mu Jingfeng and curled his lips mockingly. Mu Jingfeng, I didn't expect you to be so disgusting. After driving his wife out of the Mu family, he could still take his wife's dowry all these years and raise such a large group of beautiful women with a clear conscience. Ha ha! Although Arbor was smiling, the disdain in his eyes was as clear as day, and not a ripple could be seen on his stoic face. In this world, if you claim to be number 2 in shamelessness, no one would dare to claim to be number 1. Jojo. Mu Xingqian was in disbelief. He didn't expect his younger sister to insult her biological father like that. Mu Jingfeng was also so angry that he was completely speechless. Vicious, this daughter of his was simply vicious to the extreme. If it weren't for Mu Qingya's diligent management, would the shop and manor have been so prosperous and profitable year after year? When he thought of that woman who was as indifferent as the wind and as cold as snow, Mu Jingfeng felt irritated. He actually still couldn't forget that pair of eyes even now. Jojo, what did you mean by what you said earlier? What did he mean by driving his wife out of the Mu family? Mu Xingqian was puzzled. Didn't mother leave the Mu family by herself? Wasn't she abandoning her husband and children? Greetings to Master and Madam. A deep voice slowly rang out. In his fury, Mu Jingfeng turned to look at her. Chunke, so it's you, this unruly old servant, spouting nonsense in front of the crown princess. No wonder his daughter had the deed to the house in her hands. He should have known that it was this old witch's doing. Chapter 2674. Chun Kuei bowed in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. Master, Chun Kuei is only speaking the truth. You told me that mother left the Mu family on her own accord. Mu Xingqian turned to look at Mu Jingfeng with a trace of suspicion in his eyes. What did Jojo mean by his words earlier? Eldest young master, Madam was forced to leave the Mu family on her own accord. It's been so many years, yet family head Mu has deceived his own son like this. Chen Kuei smiled sarcastically. No wonder you wouldn't let this old servant see eldest young master again back then. This old servant wanted to see young master several times, but every time I was either told that young master was in closed-door cultivation or had gone out to cultivate, telling me not to disturb him. There was once when this old servant barged into young master's court at night, but before I reached the inner court, I was injured and had to escape. Then, this old servant understood after returning that this old servant couldn't see eldest young master anymore. If it weren't for family head Mu wanting to retain some face to avoid rumors of him being intolerant and unwilling to even let off his ex-wife's housekeeper, I'm afraid this old servant would have been killed by you long ago. Chen Kue, if you're hiding in that dead person's house, then just do as you please. You even came out to sow discord. Do you really think this family head doesn't dare to kill you? Mu Jingfeng glared coldly as he reprimanded angrily. He should have killed this unruly old servant a few years ago. He should have killed this old fart when he couldn't get the deed to the house back then. If it weren't for her crafty and slippery words that she had long left a backup plan outside to kill her and sully the entire Mu family's reputation, how could he have been so timid as to let her live until now? Reputation was very important to him. He was the Mu family's family head in the eyes of the world, the pillar of the entire Mu family. He could not fall. Family head Mu, if you want to show off, then return to your own court. You can forget about it at my place. The girl bluntly ordered him to leave. Prepare everything. When the 3 days are up, I'll personally bring people to receive it. Don't be so shameless. When the time comes, I'll make you suffer the consequences. You. Mu Jingfeng was so angry that his head was about to explode. With a fling of his sleeves, he walked out of the courtyard. Good. He really had a good daughter. Mu Qingya looked at Jojo with a complicated expression, sighed, and hurried out. Mu Xingchen, on the other hand, seemed to have lost his soul. Arbor, on the other hand, did not want to pay any attention to him. Take care of his feelings? Stop joking around. He was already an adult, but he didn't have any sense of judgment at all. He was simply a pig's head. Xiao Mu did not know that right now. She was being mischievous because she expected better from him. How could the crown prince not understand? He stepped forward and held her hand to comfort her. Can you find a group of people who can do accounting? The crown prince nodded and patted her head. Don't worry, leave this to me. Arbor nodded. She decided to settle the score with Mu Jingfeng. Before the two of them could continue speaking, they saw Hui Feng enter with a grin and report. Master, the people from the temple have agreed to the conditions and delivered the contract for Chess Mountain's Spirit Stone Mine, as well as 2 blank jade tablets for entering and exiting the Mystic Realm. The Crown Prince nodded, unsurprised. He turned to look at Sir Jojo. Arbor nodded and said, Amichim, let them go. Alrighty. Hui Feng ran off excitedly. Sir Jojo and the Crown Prince exchanged a look. Was it normal for subordinates to be abnormally excited every time they received compensation? The temple's custodian Wen Quan finally received the released holy nun and her entourage. The holy nun was no longer enveloped by her usual holy halo. Instead, she looked like a beggar when Quan glared fiercely at her. Follow me. Chapter 2675. Nie Yaoguang's body trembled slightly. She lowered her head and hurriedly followed the footsteps of the custodian. Her hands under her sleeves involuntarily clenched tightly. The 2 spirit stallions were very fast. In a flash, they arrived in front of an ordinary farmer's courtyard in the suburbs. Nie Yaoguang followed the custodian Wen Quan and carefully walked into the courtyard. A tall figure slowly turned around. His face was covered with a devil mask, and his gaze was cold as he looked at her. Nie Yaoguang's body suddenly stiffened. She hurriedly knelt on the ground. Hall Master, who told you to act on your own? A heavy palm wind swept over, landing heavily on Nie Yaoguang's face. Ah! Nie Yaoguang screamed, her body falling towards the flower bed in the courtyard. Custodian Wen Quan's old face was very serious. His head was slightly lowered. His hands were solemn as he stood at the side. His expression was very respectful. Nie Yaoguang reacted, hurriedly crawling forward. Her hair was disheveled as she awkwardly crawled to the devil-masked man's feet, repeatedly kowtowing and begging for mercy. Hall Master, I know I was wrong, Hall Master. Hall Master, I know I was wrong. Yaoguang will not dare to act on her own in the future. The devil-masked Hall Master, whose leg was being hugged by Nie Yaoguang, coldly looked down at the woman. suddenly kicking her out. If not for the fact that you still have some use, do you think that master would use so many resources to exchange for you? Yao Guang knows, Yao Guang knows. Yao Guang begged on the ground, tears streaming down her face. She regretted her past actions. After this incident, I hope you can grow a brain in the future. The devil-masked man coldly stared at Yao Guang, suddenly saying lightly, "Stretch out your hand." Yes. Yao Guang hurriedly rolled up her sleeves, revealing a section of charred skin. The devil-masked man stared at her arm and frowned, but still stretched out his finger to feel her pulse. In less than a minute, he retracted his hand. The devil-masked man casually threw her a pill. After eating, the lightning injury on your body will recover about 60%. Thank you, Hallmaster. Yao Guang stretched out her trembling hand, took the pill from the devil-masked man, and hurriedly swallowed it. The injury on her body was indeed gradually recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. The devil-masked man glanced at her indifferently. You may leave. Yes, this subordinate will take his leave. After Yao Guang got up, he hurriedly tidied up his messy hair, bowed, and left in a hurry. Wen Quan took a step forward and whispered to the devil-masked man, Master Gong. Her body isn't affected, right? The devil-masked man smiled coldly. Fortunately, her roots are not damaged. In the future, watch her carefully and don't let her do stupid things again. Yes, Wen Quan said in a deep voice, this subordinate has failed in his duty. The devil-masked man waved his hand and said, Master still values this experimental subject very much. Stay in the capital and be careful. Yes, don't act rashly for now. The man in the devil mask said coldly. Also, warn Yao Guang to behave and not provoke some people that she can't deal with. Yes, this subordinate understands. This subordinate will definitely keep a close eye on the Sanus. Wen Quan muttered with a taut face. When he raised his head again, Master Gong was already nowhere to be seen. A small pitch-black bottle wrapped in a gust of wind fell into Wen Quan's hand. A faint cold voice came from the air. Continue to give this medicine to Yao Guang. Yes. Chapter 2676. There was another heavy snowfall last night, and the entire Tsang province was blanketed in a blanket of white. This was probably the last snowfall in Tsang province. When Rong pushed open the door and entered, he immediately saw Prince Chun standing by the window like a stone sculpture, his melancholy and silent gaze resting on an unknown place. The morning wind blew against his loose white robe, causing it to sway slightly. His long, flowing black hair seemed to be rippling with mist as it fell behind his waist. Flap, flap, flap. A thin piece of paper on the ground beside the window was blown up and down by the wind. Rong's gaze landed on the paper, and he slowly walked up and bent down to pick it up. There were only a few words on the paper, but the pen was vigorous and sharp, penetrating the back of the paper like a swimming dragon. Who says lovesickness is bitter? Lovesickness is heartbreaking. Rong put away the paper and coughed lightly. Duan Yu abruptly returned to his senses, and he suddenly chuckled when he saw his stoic face from the corner of his eyes. You walk like a ghost, not making a sound at all. It's because you're too focused on a certain matter, Rong said dryly. Duan Yu chuckled and walked to the small table by the window to sit down. He pointed at the seat across from him. Are you interested in having a drink with me? Rong Qing strode forward and pulled out a stool to sit down. You didn't sleep the entire night? Duan Yu's hand paused. How is that possible? Huh. Rong Qing rolled her eyes at him. This stubborn fellow still refused to admit it. He stood by the window the entire night, and it was even more dewy, so his hair was wet. Rong Qing raised her hand and poured him a cup of hot tea. I found it. What did you say? The Crown Prince of the Divine Province and the Crown Prince of the Underworld Province both received invitations. Cough. Rong coughed lightly and said, The Crown Princess of the Divine Province did not receive one. Duan Yu looked up at him strangely. Is the Royal Academy's principal a fool? Rong Qing shook her head with a straight face. No, I'm not. The principal has the highest cultivation in this generation of the Yun family. Venerable, immortal Yun Piao Miao. In other words, he couldn't be a fool with such a high cultivation. Duan Yu looked at him speechlessly. I'm not going. If Jojo wasn't going, why would he go? Boring. Rong Qing hurriedly said, Your Highness, please think twice before you act. I heard that Crown Prince Rong Li did everything he could to get a spot and even form a team. How could a weakling like him fight his way to first place on the heavenly Yuan roll? Duan Yu asked incredulously. Even though I can't cough, if I can obtain first place on the Earth Yuan ranking, I'll be able to obtain a considerable amount of resources. The Crown Prince also doesn't want to lose to you. Duan Yu raised his brows. The Earth Prime roll? If the Tian Yuan ranking is ranked first for an individual, then the Tian Yuan ranking is ranked first for a team. Duan Yu nodded in understanding. Rong Li formed a team? Yes. Rong Qing nodded. The Crown Prince has already contacted a few of the older students in the royal school. As long as he goes in, he can form a team. Oh. Duan Yu pursed his lips disinterestedly. Then let him go. I don't want to go to a boring place like the academy. Rong couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. His Majesty had given him a death order. He had to escort His Highness to the academy and fight for first place. The annual Tian Yuan ranking in the 3 provinces was the focus of competition. However, he didn't expect the willful Prince Chun to reject the academy's invitation. Chapter 2677. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have told him that the little crown princess didn't receive an invitation. He was still to blame for being too straightforward. Rong massaged his throbbing head and advised kindly, Your Highness, there are many benefits to going to the Royal Academy. Other people can't even beg for it. Seeing that Duan Yu didn't reply, Rong Qing hastily added, Anyway, the entrance exam is on March 15th, so there are still 7 to 8 days for you to consider. Oh, is there still a need to consider? Rong Qing quickly said, Perhaps the Crown Prince of the Divine Province has a way to bring the Crown Princess along. Duan Yu was startled, but his spirits perked up. What you said makes some sense. If Emolien, that guy, insisted on going to the Royal Academy to compete for first place on the Tian Yuan roll, then he would definitely bring Jojo along even if he had to create a fake invitation. It had to be said that Duan Yu truly understood Prince Mo too, while Rong secretly sighed in relief when he saw that Duan Yu changed his mind. We should make preparations early. If there was anything to prepare, he just needed to inform his mother in advance. Duan Yu pursed his lips and thought to himself. Seeing that he didn't answer again, Rong Qing helplessly picked up her teacup and drank a mouthful of tea. With this shout, his eyes immediately lit up a little. What? This tea? This is? Such rich, spiritual energy was like a warm current sliding down the stomach when it entered her mouth. This was too comforting. Duan Yu's gloomy mood was instantly swept away, and he smugly winked at Rong Qing. How is it? It's delicious, right? The spiritual tea that Jojo gave me can't be sold outside. Rong nodded. After the spiritual tea entered my body, my meridians reacted, and the circulation of spiritual energy in my body also sped up. Duan Yu was even more pleased with himself when he heard this. He thought, that foolish old man from the Royal Academy, not accepting our Jojo into the Academy is simply his loss for 8 lifetimes. Your Highness, Xiao Kezi's report came from outside the door. Noble Lady Qing's manservant delivered a level 7 spiritual horse to our noble consort Duan. Her Highness the noble consort said she didn't need it, so she delivered it to your Highness. They said they caught it in the Crimson Shadow Forest. Your Highness, do you want to come out and take a look? It looks so mighty and beautiful. Duan Yu raised a brow. Noble Lady Qing presented Buddha with borrowed flowers. She said that she was going to give his mother a spirit horse, but in reality, she was borrowing his mother's hand to give it to him. Spirit horses were not as common as spirit stallions. Spirit stallions had spiritual awareness. Whether it was their reaction speed or their ability to travel thousands of miles in a day, they could not be compared to spirit stallions. Let's recuperate for 2 days first. I'll go take a look when I'm free. Yes, Your Highness. Xiao Kezi retreated. Rong Qing could not help but raise her eyebrows. This new noble Lady Qing is a smart person. Duan Yu curled his lips. He couldn't help but find it funny when he recalled Empress Lu's hard-pressed appearance these days. Rong Qing's eyes drooped slightly as she downed the spirit tea in one gulp. Your Highness, would you like to reward your humble servant with a few tales of spirit tea leaves? Get lost. Rong Qing rubbed her nose and walked out of the Taiji Palace with a sad expression. The small boat of friendship capsized just like that. After Rong Qing left the bedchamber, Duan Yu poured himself another cup of steaming spirit tea and took a sip. Empress Lu's unlucky life began from the moment they left the heaven of ice and snow region and returned to Flat Mountain Town. First, Princess Jiankong was poisoned with a neurotoxin after being flogged 10 times. Then, Empress Lu was forced to bring the eyesore, medicine Lady Qing, into her palace to specifically treat her daughter Jiankong. Chapter 2678. In the end, one day, the emperor coincidentally came to the central palace and bumped into the medicine woman Qing, whom he hadn't seen in a long time. The cinnabar fire in his heart burned fiercely again. Just like that, the two of them fell in love with each other again. The most outrageous thing was that they actually found a moonless and windy night to do that in a small, remote palace. When the imperial edict conferring nobility arrived at the central palace, Empress Lu was so angry that she almost fainted. Following that, she discovered that the meridians in her daughter's left leg were permanently necrotic despite a round of treatment. When Princess Jiankong walked, she had to raise her left shoe high, so her walking posture was very stiff. Even though it was raised, walking was still a bit bumpy. When she walked fast, it was even more obvious that she was limping. Empress Lu gnashed her teeth in hatred. When she connected all the dots, she couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Old Fourth, that black-hearted fellow, had been scheming against her since Pingshan Town. Step by step, he helped that vixen up. He clearly wanted to get a favored woman to compete with her, the Empress. Old Fourth was such a terrifying person. How could his honest leader deal with him? If he was pulled down by someone like Old Fourth, then wouldn't she and her son be left without a corpse? Empress Lu did her best to find all kinds of backup plans to pressure crown Prince Rong, Li, and finally got an invitation. She didn't need to worry too much about the test. In any case, taking the backup plan once was the same as taking the backup plan a few times. Hurlier would make a name for himself in the Imperial Academy, and the Academy would only serve as icing on the cake for Li Er's qualifications. As long as he obtained first place on the Earth Primordial Roll, he would be able to pull in a lot of resources for their Tsang province. At that time, the Emperor and all the officials would definitely see Li Er's ability. For this matter, they had to give it their all. Achoo! Arbor rubbed his small nose and sat cross-legged on the bed to cultivate for a while. He opened his eyes when he felt that there wasn't much spiritual energy entering his body. Although the spiritual energy in the Great Divine Province was abundant, it still had to be considered. For a place like the imperial capital that was filled with so many clans and sects, the spiritual energy would have long been thinned out no matter how abundant it was. She had to find a place with abundant spiritual energy in the Divine Province to establish a base for the Holy Water sect. This way, her senior sisters wouldn't have to stay on her fish orchid planet all day. The little fellow was definitely overthinking things. Wasn't her fish orchid star much better than any other spirit realm? However, she felt that imprisoning her senior sisters on the fish orchid planet was too much for them. However, the matter of finding spirit realms still depended on luck. It was not something that could be rushed. When the Holy Water sect opened its doors in the future, they would be settling down in the Divine Province for a long time. Arbor naturally had to find the best place with abundant spiritual energy for the sect. That was a lifetime benefit for the disciples, so they couldn't be careless about it. When Prince Imo stepped through the door, he saw that the little fellow seemed to have thought of something and rolled around on the bed. When Arbor saw the crown prince, his hands and feet froze in midair. Imo Lien giggled. In a flash, she appeared beside the bed and reached out to hug the little person on the bed. Jojo, today's weather is especially good. We were so disturbed yesterday that we couldn't make a trip out. Today, we'll go to Half Moon Cliff and take you to the hot spring villa to play. Arbor's eyes brightened. He blinked when the man pulled him into his arms and said gloomily, I haven't washed up yet. Chapter 2679. Emolien lowered his head and kissed her fair and tender little face. It's all right, hubby doesn't mind. Hey, Jojo dislikes you. Sir Jojo glanced at him and harumphed. Emolien let go of her in amusement, allowing her to jump off the bed and hurriedly wash up. After the time it takes to burn a stick of incense, the two happily held hands and prepared to leave. Then Mu Xingqian, this super big candle, suddenly appeared in front of them. What are you doing here? His Highness the Crown Prince stared at his brother-in-law in displeasure. Can't you be a little discerning? Can you not disturb the couple's two-person world? I'll go with you. Mu Xingqian made the final decision, not giving Prince Emo any leeway to refuse. The Crown Prince was simply stunned. He had a very bad premonition. This brother-in-law jumped out. Could it be that he wanted to compete with this Crown Prince for favor? From the looks of it, something wasn't right. Prince Mo's handsome face was taut as he said indifferently, The carriage isn't big. It can't fit all of us. If you know what's good for you, then don't follow us. It's all right. I'll just follow your carriage. Prince Mo. Arbor was expressionless. She didn't look at the two men's childlike undercurrent and directly walked out of the door with small steps. With a stoic face, she shouted, Hurry up. Kaixio lowered her head and inexplicably twitched the corner of her mouth. She hurriedly skipped out with the little crown princess. Kaichi was even more overjoyed. It wasn't easy for them to have a chance to go out, and the little crown princess was willing to bring them along. She was simply overjoyed. The two of them had truly received quite a bit of compensation from Madame Wu yesterday. Their admiration for the young crown prince consort was truly like a torrential river that would never cease. The two of them got on the carriage and opened the curtain to take a look. Sure enough, they saw Mu Xingqian riding a spirit stallion and following behind. Kaixio, Kaichi, and the rest of the entourage were also following behind in a carriage. The two carriages, along with a few spirit stallions, left the Mu residence's main gate and headed toward Shangle Street. Emolien seemed to have sensed something. She stretched out a finger to pull open a corner of the curtain. Her eyes coldly glanced at the corner of the street, and then she lowered the curtain. Suddenly, a hunchback man walked out from the corner. His whole body was cold, and his head was covered in cold sweat. Just now, the gaze that he shot over was really abnormally sharp. He had a feeling that he had been seen through in an instant. That person took a deep breath and turned to look at Xiao Yingshan, whose eyes were wide open and filled with hatred. Slap! Without the slightest hesitation, a slap landed on her cheek. Bitch, are you trying to cause trouble for our jade tripod market? You're just a lowly slave. What kind of relationship do you have with a big family like the Mu family? It's true, it's true. Xiao Yingshan was shocked. She knew that this hunchbacked elder was already suspicious, but she couldn't bear to see Arbor living a comfortable life. She was already so miserable, so how could this main culprit be able to live a carefree life? Even if she had to use her last breath, she would drag her down from above. It would be best if she ended up in the same state as her, falling into a pile of mud. But was that possible? Xiao Yingshan now felt especially helpless and panicked. With her status, she couldn't even get close to Arbor. Come back with me. The old man wasn't a fool. He saw many things in Xiao Yingshan's eyes, and his suspicions about her deepened. This woman probably wanted to drag their jade tripod market down with her, because she couldn't take revenge on others. Chapter 2680. Xiao Yingshan instantly became anxious. She struggled and shouted, Old man Li, I think you're scared. Old man Li's eyes flashed, and he sneered, You don't need to provoke me. Yang is someone who does big business. We won't get involved in this kind of unnecessary trouble. After saying that, he grabbed Xiao Yingshan's clothes by her chest and lifted her up like a chick. He then turned around and ran toward the amusement alley. She absolutely couldn't get involved in this matter. Otherwise, there would be endless trouble. Not a single word this bitch said was true. How could she make decisions for her own sister? Don't be ridiculous. The carriage came from the Mu residence. What did the young miss of a large aristocratic family have to do with her? How could she make decisions? Haha. Xiao Yingchun struggled and shouted. Old man Li, you have to believe me about this matter today. That girl in the carriage just now is indeed my sister. A slap blocked Xiao Yingchun's mouth. Old Manly carried her back to Amusement Alley with a vicious expression and threw her in front of Sun Yang's middle-aged Yinyang. After the matter was explained, Yinyang was silent for a long time. Then she said to Old Man Li, throw her into the pink house. I don't want to see this woman again in the future. Yes. The old man cupped his hands and picked up Xiao Yingchun, who was struggling on the verge of death. Xiao Yingchun screamed with a face full of panic. No. Yinyang, older sister Yinyang, I really didn't lie to you. Yinyang picked up a cup of tea and coldly glanced at Xiao Yingchun, treating people like fools. She originally thought that the girl Xiao Yingchun wanted to sell was like her, a country bumpkin with no background. Who knew that person actually came from the Mu residence? A girl who could come from the Mu residence, even if she was a little servant girl, wasn't someone they could casually touch. They had to avoid attracting a fishy smell for no reason. Yinyang subconsciously touched the mole at the corner of her mouth. She glanced indifferently at Xiao Yingchun, who was still shrieking after being dragged out, and snorted. Little girl, you still want to trick this old lady into your trap? You must be dreaming. Old Li grabbed Xiao Yingchun's hair and threw her into a carriage. He said to the burly man driving the carriage, send this woman to the pink house. Biddy Huang will know what to do. All right. No, I'm not going. I'm not going to that whatever pink brothel. Xiao Yingchun screamed shrilly as she pounded on the carriage, wanting to climb out. The coachman lashed out with his whip and pulled the woman into the carriage. With a shout, the coachman drove the carriage away from the amusement alley and headed for the flowery Willow Street. Next door Arbor had no idea that Xiao Yingchun had only appeared for a moment before disappearing again. At this moment, she was sitting in the carriage, hugging a jar of dried fruits as she complained to the crown prince. We took a big detour to the Heavenly Ice region, and now we're at the capital. I didn't expect that Zhou Huan, Qi Hua, and the others would arrive the day after tomorrow. They're really slow on foot. Prince Imo said in amusement, they're not as fast as 7th Yen on foot. Humph. The little girl snorted noncommittally. When she thought of 7th Yan's unadorable face, she felt a bit indignant. Where are Wang Yin and the others staying? We'll let them stay in an inn for the time being. We plan to wait for Zhou Huan and the others to arrive, then have someone prepare a residence and arrange for them to stay together. Sir Jojo flipped through a rosewood box in his hand, took out a deed, and patted it. Isn't this a ready-made one? What's there to buy? Let's go, it's on the way. Let's go to Hua Chi Street in the south of the city to take a look. Chapter 2681. The Crown Prince's mouth twitched. Why was this little girl's temperament so silly and funny? Wife, your suggestion isn't bad either. Prince Imo leaned close to his little wife and said with a smile, it just so happens that your big brother is also here. If there's any trouble, Big Brother will block it for us. Arbor's eyes darted around. Will he block it? Of course he will. If it weren't for the fact that this brother-in-law was so miserable, he wouldn't put in a good word for him. Fortunately, although this brother-in-law's brain wasn't very bright, his feelings for Jojo could be considered sincere. Prince Imo was naturally delighted that there was another person who doted on his little Jojo. Moreover, the little fellow's feelings toward this big brother were very complicated, but it was mostly anger rather than dislike. She was also a little thing who couldn't swallow her pride, so she definitely wouldn't explain anything to Mu Xingchen. She usually wore a cold face, so if one didn't know her well, they really would be scared off by her stoic little face. Her brother-in-law wasn't like him and Duan Yu, who pestered her back then and didn't fear her stoic cold face. Bah, who pestered her? And freaking why did he have to think of Duan Yu? Hurry and scram, Mo Lien gathered her thoughts and asked worriedly after some thought. Jojo, if you reconcile with Big Brother in the future, am I more important or is Big Brother more important? You're more important. Sir Jojo gave an affirmative answer without hesitation. Prince Mo was instantly overjoyed. All right, since this crown prince is still number one, forget it. I'll help you if I can, brother-in-law. If Sir Jojo had hesitated for a second earlier, his brother-in-law situation would have become even more dangerous with Prince Mo's black-bellied temperament. He definitely wouldn't smooth things over for the siblings. It was already good enough that he didn't stab his brother-in-law in the back. Mo Lien informed the carriage driver driving the carriage outside, and the carriage circled around from the side. Because Hua Chi Street in the south of the city was also a well-known street with many shops, the coachman was very familiar with the road. Taking a shortcut, he found a house in less than half an incense stick's time. Arbor looked at it and was quite satisfied. The area of the house was quite large. There were 3 rooms in the east and west, and 2 large courtyards in the north and south. There was still an empty space at the back that could be expanded. It was also possible to build a few more rows of rooms in the future. When Arbor jumped down from the carriage, Mu Xingqian also dismounted. He hurriedly followed him and asked, Jojo, where is this place? Arbor patted the deed in his hand. Mine. Mu Xingqian only felt that this little sister was extremely adorable. He hurriedly nodded and asked, Do you need Big Brother's help? Arbor glanced at him and snorted. Knock on the door. Mo Lien was a little amused. She watched as her brother-in-law ran up the stairs and banged on the door with all his might under Jojo's command. The door quickly opened. A woman in her 60s with sharp eyes came to open the door. She sized up Mu Xingqian with a sharp gaze. Young master, who are you looking for? Who are you? Arbor pulled Mu Xingqian to the side and shouted at the woman. The woman was clearly angered by Sir Jojo's words. Miss, you're knocking on my door, and you're actually questioning who the owner is? Don't you think it's funny? Arbor raised the deed in his hand and waved it. My house, understand? That woman's eyes almost popped out, but she didn't have time to scold him. Hui Feng, the little crown princess, shouted again. Hey! His little great-aunt was a little funny, but he definitely couldn't laugh. Enter. The little fellow waved her hand like a bandit entering the mountains. Chapter 2682. Hui Feng had a smug look on his face as he led his subordinates, who were at a loss for words, up to the roof and into the estate. A dozen or so great spiritual masters dealing with a few servants was truly a piece of cake. In just a short moment, all the servants in the estate had been tied up and brought to the main hall. A 17 or 18-year-old woman with her hair coiled into a woman's bun and a newborn baby in her arms exclaimed in surprise. Who? Who are you people? Ah. The woman who had opened the door earlier was thrown to the ground by Hui Feng. She struggled to get up and yelled, Miss, you bunch of bandits and robbers. How dare you be so impudent in broad daylight? I'm going to report you to the authorities for trespassing. Annie, take a good look at who's forcibly occupying a private residence, who's forcibly occupying someone else's house. Arbor gestured at the title deed in his hand and snorted before turning to look at Mu Xingqian. Do you see? This is one of my mother's dowry. But now it's being seized by a complete stranger, and they're even calling me a bandit and a robber. This is the dowry that your so-called good father and stepmother gave to my mother. Look at how meticulously they took care of it. Mu Xingqian was also very angry, but he gritted his teeth and said, Younger sister, don't worry. Mother's dowry is all yours. No one can snatch it away. The little fellow snorted, her little face tensed up in anger. Mo Lien walked up and took her little hand to pinch her fuming little face. Do you want me to call the capital governor over? Arbor shook his head. He could take care of these trivial matters himself. Why bother others? Mu Xingqian had harbored misgivings about his father since the incident in Magnolia Court, so a trace of disappointment hung on his face. His cold, electric eyes stared at the 17 or 18-year-old woman before his gaze landed on the child in her arms. His thoughts turned, and he already somewhat understood the situation. However, he still took a step forward and berated, "Who exactly are you people? Why are you living in someone else's estate without permission?" The old woman was furious. She angrily shouted at Mu Xingqian, "Who the hell are you? You came to someone else's house and scolded us loudly and even injured us. When our master comes back, he will definitely skin you alive." Mu Xingqian's eyes seemed to be able to quench poison as he stared at the old woman and asked, "Who is your master? I'll scare you to death if I tell you. My master is the current head of the Mu family." Darling Xiao was dumbfounded. She didn't have a keen sense of touch when it came to such matters. Mu Xingqian could instantly sense it, but Darling Xiao didn't even think about it. What did that mean? She speechlessly looked up at her husband. "Is this Mu Jingfeng's mistress?" Crown Prince Imo nodded at her affirmatively. "Right." Arbor was still in a daze. On the other side, Mu Xingqian had already exploded in anger. He kicked the old woman a few meters away and roared, "Shut up! This shameless thing. How could she be the daughter of a good family if she could be an outsider's mistress without any status?" He even dared to boast about it so eloquently and eloquently. The Mu family's face had been completely disgraced. Which well-educated man in an aristocratic family would have an outside mistress? That was something that only people who couldn't be brought to the table would do. Mu Xingqian felt like he was about to explode from anger. He didn't expect that his usually sanctimonious father would do such a thing. Using his ex-wife's house to have an outside mistress? No wonder Jojo called him the most disgusting person. Chapter 2683. Guards. Mu Xingqian growled decisively. Two Mu family shadow guards immediately floated in and stood in front of Mu Xingqian, not daring to even breathe loudly. "Tie them up and send them to Madam." "Yes." The two shadow guards didn't dare to say another word. They went up and picked up the old woman and the young woman carrying the child, then left quickly with a whoosh. "Jojo, Big Brother will get someone to renovate this house for you. It will take about 5 to 6 days. You can see what you want to do with it then." Xiaomu nodded her small head, accepting Mu Xingqian's goodwill. "Do you feel uncomfortable?" She could feel the low pressure around him. Her father had been lying to her for so many years, and the things he had done were exposed by his children. It was really embarrassing. Mu Xingqian felt a little bitter, but he still forced a smile. "Big Brother is fine. Jojo, Big Brother has been muddle-headed all these years. I didn't know you had it so hard in the lower star domain. It's not that hard for me." Arbor thought that she had never wronged herself in this life. She should make this clear to the man in front of her, lest he feel even worse. Mu Xingqian was stunned, and he couldn't help but find it funny. He wanted to reach out and pat his sister's head, but he didn't dare to do so without her permission. He looked at her carefully and said, "Jojo, Big Brother can't make up for what happened in the past. But let Big Brother take good care of you in the future, okay?" Emolian hurriedly pulled his little wife to his side and looked at Mu Xingqian warily. As expected, his intuition was very reliable. This brother-in-law was here to fight with him. "Pet of?" Arbor looked at Mu Xingqian and didn't say anything for a long time. "Do you know about the Long family in the Sea of Forgetfulness?" Mu Xingqian was stunned, then nodded. No matter how stupid he was, he knew about his maternal family. More than 10 years ago, the capital's Long family joined forces with the Gu family and others to rob their family of resources. "Do you know about this?" Mu Xingqian quickly shook his head. "Be smarter in the future." Arbor couldn't help but yell at him, "Don't be silly all the time. You believe everything people say." "Back then, my mother gathered a group of people to fight against the imperial capital's Long clan. Mu Jingfeng, that good-for-nothing, was worried that mother would implicate the Mu family, so he and a group of tortoise bastard elders forced her to scram. He won't tell you about this at all." Mu Xingqian clenched his fists tightly. That was not what his father had told him. He must have told you that mother abandoned her husband and children and left the Mu family for some trivial matters. Arbor sneered. "Have you never doubted it?" Mu Xingqian was speechless. At that time, he was still very young. When he heard his father say this, a thorn was buried in his heart. When he grew up, This thorn finally took root and sprouted, growing stronger and stronger. Now that he thought about it, he had believed that his mother had abandoned him without any evidence. He was so stupid that it was laughable. Jojo was right. Jojo, Big Brother, knows his mistake. Are you willing to give Big Brother a chance to take care of you? Mu Xingqian asked softly as he looked at Arbor with bright eyes. It's fine as long as I take care of Jojo. Mo Yin hurriedly followed up. Big Brother, you do what you need to do. If you're free, just come and watch Jojo. Chapter 2684. Mu Xingqian turned to look at Mo Yin. Suddenly, he felt a little annoyed and inexplicably wanted to stare daggers at His Highness the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince looked at his brother-in-law with an innocent face. Jojo, Big Brother is glaring at me. Mu Xingqian's daggers became sharper. Arbor looked at the two speechlessly. Hubby was so pitiful. He was always disliked by others. It must be because he was handsome. Arbor ignored the two and jumped into the carriage. He said to the coachman, Uncle, let's go to Half Moon Cliff. Mo Yin did not get into the carriage. She smiled at Sir Jojo and said, Wife, I want to say a few words to Big Brother. Xiao Mu made an O sound and glanced at the two men curiously. Then, she nonchalantly tossed aside the curtain and rolled into the carriage to continue eating her snacks. Mo Yin took out a spirit stallion and rode with Mu Xingqian for a while. The two exchanged daggers with each other for a while. Mu Xingqian was somewhat defeated. He stared at his brother-in-law and asked, What do you want to say to me? Jojo is a meticulous and sensitive person. You can't do this. You have to be thick-skinned. Pester her. You have to show her how good you are to her. Let her feel that you treat her sincerely. Do you understand? Mo Yin looked at his brother-in-law strangely. Why was his brother-in-law's face getting darker? Brother-in-law, you have to work hard. Whether it's a friend or a relative, my wife isn't that easy to accept. Mu Xingqian's face was dark. He stared at Mo Yin and asked, Is this how you trick her? Pester her. Thick skin, like the spring rain moisturizing things. It was subtle and silent, but it penetrated her life inch by inch, right? Looking at your shameless face, I know you hit the nail on the head. This was completely based on experience. Mo Yin blinked and put on a serious face. Brother-in-law, what are you talking about? Seeing that he was so pitiful, he wanted to teach him a few tricks to take down the little fellow. I didn't expect to be insulted by my brother-in-law. Humph. Stop pretending. Mu Xingqian gritted his teeth. Although you are the crown prince of the divine province, I will not let you off if you treat my sister badly. Mo Yin's expression immediately became serious. Brother-in-law, don't worry. My feelings for my wife can be seen by the sun and the moon. Mu Xingqian rolled his eyes, but he couldn't help but reveal a faint smile. Did she really not suffer on Seacone Planet? She didn't know before she was 7. Prince Mo complained with a distressed expression. She wasn't willing to tell me even when I asked her. However, after meeting me when I was 7 years old, don't worry, brother-in-law, I really didn't suffer much. You knew Jojo when she was 7 years old? Mu Xingqian couldn't help but exclaim. That's right. Mo Yin continued to provoke his brother-in-law. Wasn't it very early? Brother-in-law, you don't know, but my wife was so adorable when she was young. She was made of jade and snow, just like a little pink doll. TSK, you didn't see it. Thinking about it now, it's still memorable. Mo Yin sounded more and more smug as he spoke, and Hui Feng almost couldn't bear to continue listening. Your Highness, can you stop bragging? Back then, you weren't even liked by the Crown Princess. You make it sound like you're very familiar with her, but you're not at all. What does she look like? Is she still stoic? Stoic. She's been stoic for more than a decade. Chapter 2685. What did you say? Mu Xingqian reprimanded in a low voice. You're not allowed to say that my younger sister is expressionless. So what if she's expressionless? Expressionless looks good too. And Mo Yin, brother-in-law, weren't you the one who brought up the words expressionless face first? Hui Feng's mouth twitched as he looked at Prince Mo and young Master Mu. Why were these two still chatting awkwardly? They were in two completely different worlds. I'll definitely treat younger sister well in the future. Emol Yin's eyes were tinged with a hint of a smile. She whipped the horse, and the horse galloped forward. Brother-in-law, just do as I teach you. I guarantee that my wife will change her opinion of you within a month. Mu Xingchen quickly waved his whip and chased after her. You don't need to tell me. I'll naturally use my own method to treat younger sister well. He would definitely work hard to make younger sister believe that this big brother of hers was sincere and absolutely sincere to her, without any personal benefits mixed in. Arbor didn't deliberately listen to their conversation, but their last two sentences were spoken rather loudly, so it was hard for her not to hear them. She lifted a corner of the curtain and saw Sir Jojo sitting there with a jar of snacks in his hands. However, in the depths of her eyes, she saw two tall figures, one in green and one in black, urging their horses forward, one in front and one in back. Men were truly strange creatures. Sir Jojo calmly stuffed a piece of dried fruit into his mouth. Just now, these two people didn't even have eyebrows and eyes, but now they were like brothers as they galloped forward, one in front and one in back. Sigh, they truly had childish temperaments. Arbor tossed the curtain aside and climbed onto the soft cushion to lie down. She rolled around on it and hugged a soft pillow to comfortably take a nap. Gilded Garden should be bustling with noise and excitement now, right? Miss Xiao curled her lips, and there was an unclear sense of schadenfreude in her heart. It was already past noon when the group arrived at Half Moon Cliff. At a glance, a large expanse of lush green, fertile fields entered everyone's sight. There were many farmsteads at the foot of the mountain, and many villagers had gathered, forming a rather lively little village. The fields at the foot of the mountain now belonged to Lady Xiao Xiao. Prince Kong was really reliable. Not only did he send her a lot of fields, but he also provided her with enough servants to take care of the field. Everyone abandoned their carriages and climbed up the mountain, admiring the beautiful scenery along the way. There were a few guards at the entrance of the mountain path. When they saw Arbor's group coming over, they were puzzled and wanted to stop them. Xiao Mu took out the jade identity tablet that the old prince had given her from her pocket and waved it before the guards. Those people immediately bowed respectfully, unable to hide the excitement on their faces. This lowly one has eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. Greetings, Crown Prince, Crown Princess. The people here had long known that Prince Kong had given the entire mountaintop and fertile farmland to the young Crown Princess. There was probably no one else in the sovereign capital who could do such a thing. Naturally, these mountain guards were a gift from the mountain. Their current master was the little Crown Princess. How could they not greet her politely? Arbor's group didn't allow them to follow. They waved their hands and continued to stay where they were. Splendid Mountain Villa was built at the top of Half Moon Cliff. The entire villa exuded a simple and dignified aura. If one looked down from the sky, they would be able to see the inner garden of Splendid Mountain Villa. There was a very wide crescent-shaped hot spring belt, and several springs were emitting a warm white steam. The hot spring garden was bathed in white mist and filled with a celestial aura. When the group arrived at the entrance of Splendid Mountain Villa on the cliff, it was already 5 in the morning. Chapter 2686. When Steward Fong of Half Moon Cliff heard that the Crown Prince and Crown Princess had come to the manor, he immediately led all the senior stewards, maids, and manservants of the manor to greet them. So when Arbor and the others arrived at the entrance, they saw dozens of people lined up to greet them. Welcome, Crown Prince and Crown Princess. Arbor's gaze shifted to the plump steward with a kind face and waved at him. The plump steward hurriedly ran forward and greeted them with a smile. Crown Princess, this lowly one's surname is Fong. We didn't know that the Crown Prince and Crown Princess had come to the manor. Please forgive us for not going out to meet you. When the plump steward saw the expressionless Lord Xiao, he felt a bit guilty. After all, they weren't familiar with these people's temperaments, so the servants felt a bit uneasy. Arbor naturally wouldn't make things difficult for the servants. As long as others didn't find trouble with her, she would close her eyes and let bygones be bygones. She wasn't that particular about whether to welcome them or not. Lead the way. Ah, yes, yes. The plump steward hurriedly nodded and personally led them to the hot spring in the inner court. In addition to the half-moon-shaped hot spring in the inner court, the layout of this splendid manor was picturesque and beautiful. The entire manor was surrounded by mountains and rivers. Behind the cliff was a large lake, and the silver waterfall at the top of the cliff was like a flying dragon, surging endlessly. The plump steward led them to a place called the Misty Rain Pavilion. After tea and refreshments and a short rest, the little girl decided to soak in the hot spring. Prince Mo and young Master Mu saw that she was happy, so they let her play as she pleased. Mo Yin was a bit helpless. It was all eldest brother-in-law's fault for insisting on coming. Otherwise, he could have accompanied his wife in the hot spring. Alas, man proposes, God disposes. If he had known, he wouldn't have come to the manor today. The little girl soaked in the half-moon spring alone for more than an hour, having a lot of fun. When she climbed ashore, her entire face was flushed and bright and beautiful. When she returned to the Misty Rain Pavilion, she saw two men playing chess out of boredom. The exchange of blows was like a smokeless battle, and the killing was already set. Seeing the little girl running back, the two of them raised their eyes at the same time and looked at her. Madame Jojo had changed into a bright red dress, and a jade hairpin was inserted into her hair. Mo Yin wanted to laugh when she saw her red battle suit. The little guy was definitely up to something. Mu Xingqian's eyes were bright as he looked at his little sister. His heart was filled with joy. His younger sister was really beautiful. According to his third uncle, his younger sister and mother looked quite similar. He wondered how beautiful his mother was when she was young. You've been brewing for so long. Come and have some tea first. Mo Yin waved at her and pulled her to sit beside her. You two played chess for the whole afternoon? The little fellow picked up the teacup and curiously glanced at the table. He lost interest in a single glance and it was so boring. If it wasn't for his brother-in-law sitting here, would he let her go? Umph. Lady Jojo blinked her eyes. Who won? Of course, your husband has won this round. Mu Xingqian gave him a snort. This cunning Prince Mo. He could tell that this person was one face in front of his little sister and another in front of others. What a black-bellied fellow. The Mu family should be done with the ruckus. Arbor tilted his head. Why don't we go back? They should wait until they were done with the ruckus before going back. This was because Jojo only wanted to know the result. There was no need to know the process. Just thinking about it gave him a headache. Chapter 2687. Mu Xingqian's expression darkened when he recalled his father's actions. Mu Xingqian nodded with a heavy heart and said, Okay, let's go back and take a look. The three stood up together. When they returned to the city, Jojo wanted to ride a horse. Prince Mo was amused and reached out to carry her onto the horse, but he retracted his hand from his brother-in-law's glare. His brother-in-law specially found a jujube-colored stallion for Jojo and led it to Sir Jojo. He glared at Mu Xingqian's restless hands and glared at him. So infuriating. Prince Mo glanced at his wifey aggrievedly. Jojo covered her mouth and rolled her large eyes at him. She happily hopped onto the horse and galloped off with a slap on the horse's butt. Let's see who's the first to return to the city. Mo Yin couldn't help but find it amusing. Looking at the little fellow's cheerful back, he quickly mounted his horse and chased after her. Chow Chow, are there any benefits to being the first to return to the city? Benefits? Arbor's spirited voice was heard. There's good food. Huifeng couldn't help but chuckle. He urged his horse to follow closely behind Mo Yin and Mu Xingqian. Your Highness, let's hurry. There won't be any good food if we're late. Mo Yin couldn't help but laugh. It was already evening when they returned to the Mu residence. They arrived at the Mu residence's entrance under the red sunset glow. What they didn't expect was that Mu Jingfeng had left early in the morning and had just returned home, yet Madame's gilded garden seemed to be in an uproar. Fortunately, Madame Mu had nowhere to vent her anger after holding in for the entire afternoon. The moment they arrived at the entrance, they were welcomed toward Gilded Garden. Arbor originally didn't want to watch this farce, but he thought that Mu Jingfeng must be fuming to death right now, so it would be good to see his agitated appearance. Thus, he agreed to go to Gilded Garden. She lowered her head to look at her bright red battle attire and hopped briskly. Her small hand was caught by Prince Imo. The Crown Prince looked at her in amusement and said softly, "Put on a serious expression." Was Jojo-sama not serious? A certain little person blinked and raised his little hand to touch his little face subconsciously. Actually, there wasn't the slightest change in expression on her stoic face. Only Prince Imo, who was familiar with her, could see through her stoic face to see her elated mood. The little fellow grinned and suppressed his good mood of watching a good show. He followed the maidservant who led the way into the Gilded Garden. As soon as he arrived at the gate of the Gilded Garden, he heard the sounds of crying. Mu Jingfeng's flustered and exasperated roars were mixed in, which inexplicably made one feel refreshed. For some reason, Jojo-sama felt very comfortable when he saw how uncomfortable they were. Mu Jingfeng turned his head and saw the three culprits walking in. His face instantly contorted. "Arbor," Mu Jingfeng roared. "Look at what you've done." Mu Xingqian looked at his father in disbelief. "Father, what did younger sister do? Was it she who told you to have a mistress and raise her in mother's courtyard? Was it she who told you to secretly have a child with a mistress behind your wife's back?" This person was simply unreasonable. He actually had the cheek to roar at his younger sister. Mu Jingfeng's face instantly contorted, and he couldn't help but roar, "Mu Xingqian, watch your attitude." He had long been dissatisfied with this son of his. He was usually cold and expressionless, but at crucial moments, he liked to drag his father down. Chapter 2688. If it weren't for the fact that he didn't have any other sons, did he think that he could continue being the Mu family's young master? He didn't know what was good for him. Sure enough, that woman's children weren't easy to worry about. "Mu family head, what are you shouting about?" Prince Imo coldly swept a glance at him. Mu Jingfeng swallowed his anger and cupped his hands toward the Crown Prince. "Greetings, Crown Prince." Aggrieved, truly aggrieved. When others were fathers-in-law, it was always the son-in-law who was courteous to his father-in-law and saluted upon meeting. But here, it was the complete opposite. Mu Jingfeng still didn't know the Crown Prince's attitude toward the Qiao family's two elders. If he saw such a stark contrast, he would surely faint from anger. Mu Qingya was currently sitting in the main seat. Aside from some sadness on her face, there wasn't any resentment or dissatisfaction. Arbor sized her up and became increasingly vigilant. Ever since she returned, the impression that this Madame Mu gave her was that her words and actions were watertight. Everyone in the family, including the clan head and even her mother's loyal servant, Chen Yi, was full of praise for her. Arbor only trusted her intuition. No one was perfect. For a woman who could conceal her emotions so tightly and act so watertight, Arbor instinctively felt that there was a big problem with her. Of course, without substantial evidence, Arbor naturally wouldn't foolishly say something without evidence. Madame Mu had been in charge of the family for more than a decade. Arbor naturally wouldn't believe that a smart woman like her didn't have a group of forces in her hands. At Madame Mu's feet, an 18 or 19-year-old woman was currently kneeling. Her delicate face had a pair of misty almond-shaped eyes, and she was sobbing as she hugged her child. Mu Qingya's voice was somewhat cold. "If Master wants to take in a concubine, no one will stop him. Why should he raise her outside? Now that rumors are spreading outside, it's not pleasant to hear." Mu Jingfeng's expression was very ugly. He had already heard rumors among the people on his way back. Some busybodies even spread his romantic affairs everywhere like storytellers, saying that he gave his ex-wife's dowry to his mistress, and that he was caught red-handed by the eldest young master while fooling around. It simply made him lose all his face. It was all because of these two unfilial sons. All these years, he only had one son, Mu Xingqian. What was wrong with raising a beautiful mistress and wanted to have a few more sons. Was it worth it to make such a fuss? This pair of unfilial sons actually barged into Cheong-er's court. Their behavior was so unruly that it made one's hair stand on end. The crown princess isn't someone who lacks a courtyard. Why would she barge into someone else's courtyard and do such a shameless thing? This crown prince let people barge in. Father, don't blame little sister. I was the one who forced my way in. Before Arbor could rebuke Mu Jingfeng, the crown prince and Mu Xingchen spoke up at the same time. Mu Jingfeng was fuming. Now that the inner court was on fire, he had to deal with Arbor, that unfilial daughter, and appease Madame Mu. It was really a headache. Although you are the crown prince, it's not right for you to trespass on private property. What house did we break into? I think you've gone senile. Arbor directly retorted. This crown princess is going to sue her for forcibly occupying a residence and encroaching on my mother's private property. Arbor coldly shouted, Mu Jingfeng, I gave you face, but you don't want it. You brought this upon yourself. Originally, she did not want to make things so ugly. Since this Mu Jingfeng had no sincerity in returning her things, she would make him swallow his pride, spit out everything that belonged to her. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.